Order, please. The Committee of the Whole House on Bills will come to order. There's been a call for recorded vote on the motion that the committee rise and report progress. Are the whips satisfied? Okay, once again, I ask for complete silence during the vote. Again, and proceed.
Mr. Caldwell.
No.
Mr. Churchill.
Nay.
Ms. Bernard.
No.
Ms. Reagan. Monsieur Sanson.
No.
Mr. McNeil. Ms. Whalen.
No.
Mr. Glavine.
No.
Ms. Casey. Mr. McClellan.
No.
Ms. Metledge-Diab, Mr. Younger, Mr. Horn,
No.
Mr. Hines,
No.
Mr. Stroink,
No.
Ms. Arab,
No.
Mr. Delory,
No.
Mr. Ince,
No.
Mr. Kasoulis,
No.
Mr. Fury, he's not here. Mr. Farrell,
No.
Mr. Gordon Wilson,
No.
Mr. Rankin,
No.
Mr. Rowe,
No.
Mr. McGuire,
No.
Ms. Lonis Croft,
No.
Ms. Treen,
No.
Mr. Goff,
No.
Mr. Jessam,
Nay.
Mr. Irving, Mr. McLeod,
Yes.
Mr. McMaster,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Bailey,
Yes.
Monsieur d'Entremont,
Oui.
Mr. Corbett,
Yes.
Ms. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. David Wilson,
Yes.
Ms. Zan,
Yes.
Ms. Peterson Rayfuse,
Yes.
Mr. Beliveau,
Yes.
Mr. Oral,
Yes.
Ms. McFarland,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Lohr,
Yes.
Those in favor of the motion, 16. Those opposed, 23.
The motion is defeated. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess we'll continue debate on Bill 60 then, instead of reporting progress to the House. You know, we've gone through talking about Bill 60 and the fact that by the government's own admission, this is a flawed bill. The Minister of Health admitted last week that his bill is flawed. And he's right on that, Madam Chair. There can be no dispute about the fact that this bill is flawed. The government has bungled this bill at every step. We talked a little bit about how the first iteration of this bill allowed menthol-flavored tobacco. There was a flaw in this bill right from the very beginning. And at every step along the way, there's been more flaws added to it. And in the whole process of moving this bill through, I think there's been a little bit of loss of sight over what was intended in the beginning. Because what was intended in the beginning, and I think it was a well-intentioned bill to begin with, and what was intended was they forgot about protecting youth, which is where we started. A lot of mistakes in the execution of that intent, and it picked up e-cigarettes, tried to define them as tobacco. That was a mistake. Exempting menthol from the beginning, that was a mistake. So as we've moved through this process, the government's forgot about what their original intent was, and they've got caught up in the hoopla of just trying to get a bill passed. Any bill, doesn't matter what it looks like, we're just going to pass it through. Madam Chair, the right thing for the government to do right now would be to pull this bill. To pull this bill, do the consultations, listen to Nova Scotians, understand the subject matter, understand the difference between tobacco and vaping, and then bring a good bill back to this House. Don't put a flawed bill through and say, we'll fix it later. Bring a good bill through, one that protects Nova Scotians. But it appears that the government is not willing to do that. So all we're asking for today is for the government to be open to changing and strengthening the bill. That's all we want. But if they insist on passing this bill, then the government must respect the fact that flavored tobacco is the gateway to youth smoking, and flavored tobacco should be banned. And if they insist on passing this bill, then they owe it to understand themselves in a manner that they can explain to Nova Scotians the ramifications of this bill. So we heard today in question period, the Premier was talking about the marketing of e-cigarettes and the marketing of the vapor devices. And the Premier proudly stood on his feet and said that they would all be out of sight and behind the power walls. And I don't know, Madam Chair, I'm hoping maybe somebody can stand up and tell me what is the plan for that. Because I've heard conflicting stories from the Health Minister, I've heard conflicting stories from members of the government through the media, and now we heard today the Premier, what he expects this bill does to the marketing of vaping devices and e-juices and stuff. So I'm hopeful that that can be explained to Nova Scotians, because right now we're faced with a bill that will pass that people don't understand, including the people that will most likely stand to their feet and support it, what it means. So we do see a number of bills before this legislature that are hard to understand, that are confusing, that don't provide Nova Scotians clarity. And all we're asking the government to do is to provide some clarity around the bills that they're going to pass. Because we know, we're not naive, we know that these bills will pass. We're hopeful that they can be amended such that people can understand them and then people can accept them. But we know they will pass. So in saying that, Madam Chair, in closing, I would just urge the government to salvage what is left of this flawed bill and do the right thing and ban the flavored tobacco, all flavored tobacco, in this session. So with those few words, I'll take my seat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The honourable member for Queen Shelburne.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's certainly a pleasure to stand and have a few minutes on Bill number 60. I also want to point out that the earlier speakers of tonight, and I want to thank them for their comments, and I actually made a few notes of the speaker from Pictou East, and also want to recognize I thought it was one of the best speeches I heard in this House, and I know I'm a bias, but our interim leader, our member from Halifax Needham, laid it out very clearly, the debate and our position on this particular bill. And I encourage, maybe in 25 or 30 years' time, there's going to be students or youth looking at this particular debate, and I encourage them to go and review the words that our member from Halifax Needham reflected on this bill just earlier tonight. And I also have some of my own remarks, Madam Chair, and I hope to show that here in the next few minutes, what I have observed on this particular bill, the discussion, the debate, and what I have heard not only from our caucus members, from the PC opposition, and also the observations that I have endured over my lifetime. And what I have observed just in this weekend while this bill is before the House. And what I had noted before I even get into my notes here is that early today in question period, the Premier of this government suggested that he is here until Christmas. Well, let me tell you, when a bill of this importance is before this House of Assembly, I encourage you to bring your gifts, and I'm going to hang my sock in this corner because I'm here to stand up for the people of Nova Scotia and do the right thing. So we all, and I'm not going there, but I've had the presence of mind to talk about this bill. I'm going to stay focused on it. To me, smoking and tobacco, the Canadian Cancer Society has recognized, and I repeat, Madam Chair, for those who are listening, the single best thing that you can do to improve your health is to quit smoking. And I want to say, and I want to come across as I'm not here as one of those die-hard smokers and a born-again smoker. All I want to say is I want to give a testimony of that. Yeah, I have had the opportunity to smoke at a very early age, I think somewhere between 13 to 20. And I know exactly where I was when I made the decision to quit, and it was not an easy moment, or certainly a struggle to achieve that. I was in the Yarmouth Old Arena, hockey arena, playing junior hockey, and I come back after a shift and I literally could not get my breath. And I said to myself, that may not be the thing for me if I want to pursue whatever I want to do. I made the decision then to quit smoking. And I can tell you it was a decade or more before I got that out of my system. And this is what I'm here to talk about, is that not only we're here a number of years later to talk about legislation that can have an effect on Nova Scotians, I think is the most crucial thing that we can do, to have that opportunity to talk about legislations that will affect society in years to come. So I encourage you to bring your Christmas present, hang your sock, because we need to get this one right. And that's exactly what I heard across the constituency as I traveled back for the Remembrance holidays over this last few days. I also want to point out that we have to break this culture that has accepted smoking as a form of recreational use or whatever. And I want to point out that my father, who has the same name as myself, who has passed away, actually came through the Navy, and the Navy at them times, they encouraged people, or they contributed to their dealing with stress by making sure that they had access to Navy rum and cigarettes. And I want to tell you that I don't think there was anybody in Nova Scotia that enjoyed Navy rum as good as my father. And I can tell you that I appreciate that too, but I'm not here to talk about that liquid. I'm here to talk about cigarettes. Yeah. So, but it's interesting to know that, and I want to tell you this quick story. My father spent the last 2 years in a place called Veterans Place in Yarmouth. And to me, it was one of those times when you have an opportunity to really get to know your parents, and I really appreciate that quality time. And where I'm going to bridge, Madam Chair, is talking about how, as a society, we have found ourselves learning those habits and appreciating that my father smoked heavy. But he quit the last few years of his life because he didn't simply have a choice. And one of those stories I want to tell you that before I get into my notes here is that when I was into Veterans Place, my father wanted to come out and visit his community, which is roughly an hour away. And one time I went in to pick him up, and he was eager to go. And if you knew my father, he was a very energetic, and he could use the English language in a very colorful manner. And I'll leave that to your imagination, but if the guy was there today that did the beep, 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 I think he would have to be working in overtime to know that he beeped out a lot of the words when the nurse said to Mr. Belleville, we can't find the oxygen tanks that you need to go to make your trip to your community. And there was a little small oxygen bottle that he wanted. And my father was not going to take no for an answer. and he needed that oxygen because he had smoke happening and the damage on his lungs. And he insisted, and I won't use his words, but he insisted that he knew that there had to be oxygen in large tanks of it in that hospital in Yarmouth, and he was determined to go to his community that day. So he instructed a nurse to go find an oxygen tank. And she came back a few minutes later, and she had one of the largest canisters that probably I ever seen in my life, roughly 4 feet high. And to me, it reminds me of a acetylene tank, but it was filled with oxygen. And no problem with me. I was very capable, little lifting that weight at that time, and I may have got some assistance from some of the other people there in the veterans place. But we put the large tank of oxygen in the back of the car, and we proceeded to our community, and we had an enjoyable day with my father with a small hose hooked up to this large tank, and we literally lugged it wherever we wanted to go. The point that I'm trying to make is that we have come through that culture. And as a young man, when I was in a fishing boat, the captains, when I was in my teens, would literally take 3 or 4 cigarettes and light them all up at one time. And he would pass the remaining 3 cigarettes, he enjoyed one of them to himself, would pass them back aft to the crew members. That is the culture that I come from. And it's for us. Now we have the presence of mind that we have a lot of changes over those last 35 or whatever years, and I'm going to reflect that in my speech, where we have moved as society. And I think we have to know that, because my father, myself, wants to pass on those improved habits to the next generation and our grandchildren, the hope that their health and their habits is going to be better than the previous generation. So that's exactly, Madam Chair, where I'm going with my speech tonight. So, if you look up the rationale for smoking, or the bans that legislatures across other jurisdictions have talked about, smoking is an option. It is an option that we all have, whereas breathing is not. And the protection, the effects of secondhand smoke, and the increase of risk due to heart disease and cancer. And a number of the previous speakers talked about that, but I think we need to dig into that a little bit more, because to me, it was earlier talked about that our health care alone in this province is in roughly in the area of $4 billion. It's a little less than our overall budget. And if we want to start saving some money, I would think that there's a great opportunity to have a healthy society. The world organizations consider smoking bans to have influence to reduce the demand for tobacco by creating an environment where smoking becomes increasingly more difficult, and to help shift social norms away from the acceptance of smoking in everyday life. And banning smoking in public place has helped to cut the premature births by 10%, according to the new research in the United States. And what I heard here tonight was on the local. Some of this information that I just Googled and got off the internet, talking about across the world in North America. But what I heard here tonight is 3,600 youths in Nova Scotia will be affected, will have the opportunity, and will be affected by probably experimenting with tobacco the very first time. And to me, that is something that we need to stand up and discourage that. And to me, I talked about earlier, certainly I want to recognize the struggle. And I know people, plenty of people in my community, including my family, who struggle to to try to quit the addiction they have to tobacco. And one of the easiest way of overcoming that, Madam Chair, is by simply not beginning to smoke in the first place. And if we as legislature can introduce that and prevent that, then I think that all our society, especially our youth, will benefit from it. And that's why we are here tonight, and we're looking at longer hours to talk about this very topic. Madam Chair, I'm the first one to admit tonight that certainly as an individual, I too have my weakness. I question some of my judgments over my life, and I quit. I quit when it was cool. When it was cool to smoke. And to me, we came up through that culture where you kind of took a liking to where your peers was at the time, and if they smoked, well, that's something I may want to experiment with. And I really have an issue with people who get in a position who smoke and don't smoke, and to me, they want to be, they're born again, non-smoker, and I know that people really have an issue with that. But I think we, as legislature, we have an opportunity to put a bill before the House that will discourage our youth and give them the information to actually take this bad habit up. And we're also in a position to teach our children well. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do, is that we can recognize that we may have some poor habits, and we certainly want to pass none of them on to future generation. And one of the points that I know some of the earlier presenters talked about was the cost of tobacco. And I would hope that the members in government will listen to this particular statement that I'm going to make. And I don't want to use the word challenge, but I think may be appropriate. I challenged them to show me that I'm wrong on this point. Because tobacco in Nova Scotia revenue for their budget, the estimated tax accumulated by tobacco sales, with my estimates, is $226 million into our treasury. And Madam Chair, this is the point. This is the point that I want to make, because I know how hard it is for individuals who are addicted to nicotine to stop smoking. But there's one thing that's greater, and it's this point right here. The addiction that all governments, including the present sitting governments, has to that revenue. That is the point, that is the challenge, and I'm sure you that we'll have a different outcome of that if sitting governments can break that addiction to that tax revenue. Simply that. The addiction is greater than nicotine. And I've seen a number of people struggle and try to move away from tobacco. And I said earlier, I struggled with that for a decade of trying to get that out of my system. So I understand how existing governments are addicted to that tax, and I'm looking forward for them individuals to stand up and take that challenge and explain that why they're not addicted to that money. And Madam Chair, as I drove home this weekend to attend the Remembrance Day service, I had a time to reflect over my youth, and one of the earlier messages that I had, or the evidence about protecting your health, actually came from my wife when she was carrying our children. And my observation, I spent my life observing the ocean, but I also spent observing life around me. That individual, my wife, while she was carrying our children, did not take one pill in her body. She did not smoke. And I observed other mothers during the similar time in their life. They would do the same thing. And they was not only protecting their health, they were protecting and controlling the environment of the next generation. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here. And to me, it is so important that we hear that we can create legislation that's going to have the effect, that's what's going to be best for society, what's going to be best for the people of Nova Scotia. And what I heard here tonight is that the opposition is going down the right path. What I've heard during the weekend is the opposition is going down the right path. And it's unfortunate that the sitting government is not taking the lead from the opposition in knowing that they have an error or a bad bill and it needs to be adjusted. And, Madam Chair, I think there's lessons that our parents are still teaching us after they're gone and passed away. I really do. That there's certain lessons in life of, that can teach us about what's right, what is the right thing to do. And there's going to be an opportunity for the future generations to look back in Hanson, and here we are tonight. Some of you may feel that we're in extended hours. To me, this is all part of our job, is to stand here. Somewhere in the future, generations of young individuals at today's time are going to look back at this moment in history. That was the one that really bothered me, is when I was driving to and from the city, is when an individual looks back in 30 years' time at Hanson and wanted to know what side of the debate was that individual from my constituency on. And I think that is very crucial, because I want to be able to say that I did not bow down to big tobacco companies. I took the advice of what's best for those individuals in future generations. And I'm very comfortable with that. And, Madam Chair, I listened in law amendments, and to me, whole part of this whole exercise is learning and experience the lessons that's taught in law amendments. And there was a doctor there that he did not mix his words. And he simply told me, or he told the audience, I shouldn't say myself, he told the audience, and he was very abrupt in his words, talking about the effects that nicotine and people who have smoked it over a number of years, the effects that they had on their health. He got my attention. In his words, he said, I have cut the tongues out of those individuals who have smoked for a number of years. There was no wavering. There was no confusion about where he stood on the benefits of tobacco. He went into great detail about how addictive cigarette smoking was to society. And he also pointed out that menthol cigarettes, 30% of the youth are addicted to to menthol. And to me, there was a number of these scenarios that the doctors pointed out, and it was very clear. Our choice was do our work here and make sure that we could discourage our youth from smoking in the future. Madam Chair, I want to talk about, first of all, I know we all have our children, our grandchildren, and there's one girl that I have, my only grandchild, excuse me. Her name is Adrian. And I'm just thinking about how she's going to review Hansard, and again, what I said in 25 or 30 years' time, she looks back, and what side of the debate are we on, or her grandfather's on? And I also have two daughters, and I'm proud to say that those daughters, to my knowledge, have never smoked. And to me, it's just a reflection of how we move the society from generation to generation. And to me, I can't think of any stronger testimony than standing here tonight and saying, I'm not scared of the big tobacco companies. I'm going to do what's right for society. I'm going to talk about how my father smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I was a heavy smoker, smoked from 13 to 20. And what a legacy to talk and leave to your grandchildren to say that that habit is bad for society, and we need to be able to have stronger legislation to discourage youth from repeating a bad habit. That is the message. And to me, the second part of that message is that we talked about how difficult it is to break this addiction to nicotine. But I also want the future generation to know that the sitting government, the present government, has a stronger addiction to the revenue that's generated by tobacco. That is a part of their problem, and we need to recognize that. If my father recognized the issue, if I recognize the issue about our addiction to something that's not healthy for it, then we have to accept that and try to change it. But if we're not willing to accept the addiction to that cash, we're going to struggle. And we're going to struggle, and we're going to be here, and we're going to be opening our gifts, and I'm going to have my sock hung in this corner. So I think you know where I'm going with this debate. But Madam Chair, I just want to go in a little different direction here for a while. And in my route to my home, and I have a chance to reflect, and as I can tell, many of you may have already recognized that I am a child of the 60s. And it's interesting to look back how society have changed in those number of years. And if you just look back at how society has tried to improve on some of the habits that we had over the last 4 or 5 decades, and we have tried to make life better for the next generation. And I've come up with just a few. And I know as a young teenager, after 6,700 emergency room visits and death of 3 children between 1978 and 1988, lawn darts was pulled from the marketplace because they were unsafe and they caused some problems in society. Madam Chair, I come from an era where there was no seat belts, and the only click that I heard when I was in an automobile was a cigarette lighter going in and lighting the cigarette. That was the only click in the car. There was no such thing as a child's seat or seat belts. And look how far we come in them decades. and we look at our playgrounds, and I can tell you that I came through an era, and I'm questioning some of the stuff that I'm reading here, because we actually survived. We survived some of those when there was playgrounds, and we had swings. There was no pea gravel. There was no soft cushions at the bottom of the slides, and we endured. But the point I'm trying to make, Madam Chair, is again, that society has constantly improved the health protection of each generation as it moves forward. Madam Chair, sun protection. Back when I was a youth, I don't think there was any such thing as sunscreen that was on the marketplace, a sunblock, and to me, there was basically non-existent. And I remember as a youth getting my first bicycle, and I still remember that English bicycle, narrow tires. It was the best shiny bike on the block in my community. It rode faster than all the competition that was in my community, and I could go like the wind on my bicycle that I paid $58 for, and I went 53 times Irish mossing. My father gave me the last few dollars to ride that. And I remember very clearly one thing that stands out in my mind, that my bike, my skating, there was no helmets. But society, each and every decade, has improved the safety and well-being of our individuals across society and have improved on that. And, well, I'm getting there. And one of the things, I'm backing up now to when I was a young child. And as a young child, as many of my generation, we were put or placed in a playpen or a bed, and it was surrounded by lead paint. And now I can tell you that the lead paint has since been removed. So there's a theme here. There's a theme here, is because we're continuing to recognize when there is harm to our society that we stop it. We stop it there and we make improvements, and then we move forward as a society. Now my colleague here from Pig 2 East talked about a water hose. Now, I'm talking about my days on the skating pond, and we did not have our own personal bottles with our names on it or our team logo. We had a pond, and we just simply took the back of our skates and we made a hole in the pond, scraped away the algae, and you could drink to your heart's content. And we survived. But that is not recommended today. And I've had the pleasure of just going out to, some call it old-timers hockey, but I'm not going to use that word. I call it superheroes, or the Sunday night crowd. And I recognize just this weekend that each individual, or a lot of the individual, I still do the one bottle, the whole team routine, but everybody has their individual bottles for their own personal well-being, and I respect that. But society has moved towards cutting the hole in the pond and moving the algae out for health reasons to have your individual bottles. So, point well taken. I think that what I'm trying to repeat here is that we recognize when there's a serious issue, we correct it. And we have a time tonight, Madam Chair, to have a bill in front of us, Bill 60, that is flawed. And we have the time to correct it. So bring your presents, and we'll be here till Christmas because we need to get this right. That's right. And before I move on to this one, it was also interesting that as children, we would, I talked about no seat belts, and if we was in the back of a truck, that was like going to a Sunday school picnic. We couldn't have no better time. No seat belts, carefree, and the law enforcement at the time simply, it wasn't an issue. But now it is. And we have corrected that from children's safety seats. And I can tell you that my granddaughter, and I watch as her mother fastens that seat in the car, and I can tell you it reminds me of the spacemen or the astronauts, how well they're harnessed. And I'm not an engineer, Madam Chair, but I know that there's a number of points where that individual, the small child, is really safely secure in that particular vehicle. So we have really come a long ways over the last 3 or 4 decades of improving our health, especially for the next generation. And we have an opportunity here before this bill, Bill 60, to do just that and to improve society as we move forward. Madam Speaker, I also pointed out that when I went home this weekend, I had 72 hours to do some reading and to collect some stories, editorials from local papers. And I know I used a number of my life experiences here, but these are just a few of the editorials that I have gathered from the local media outlet. And this is from one of the local radio stations. I won't point them out, but I can certainly table this if you wish, Madam Chair. But it talks about the e-cigarettes debate heating up. November the 5th, 2014. Health organizations in Nova Scotia say the government is sending mixed messages with its law surrounding e-cigarettes and flavored tobacco. Smoke-Free Nova Scotia say they are disappointed. I'll read that again. They are disappointed in the decision. And flavors like peach and grape are kiddie flavors. And I'll table that so other members can read it at their leisure. That's just one of the editorials. So it's not just coming from the individual from Queen Shelburne. It's also the local media has picked up on this. And I also want to point out that I've noticed that complete opposition support against this bill. So you've got all the opposition against this, and I'm going to table 2 or 3 more of the editorials. It seems that the momentum is gaining. And if I made reference to 3 or 4 of an opportunities where we've seen seat belts, drinking water, all them poor habits has improved, I think everybody can understand where I'm going with this point. So we'll read a few more here from the local media. And this one is from, what was surprising was the amendments removed the ban not only on flavored e-juice, but also on flavored tobacco products. And what it ends with, I won't read all of it, but I'll table it, Madam Chair. It says, through this editorial, that the present government has caved to the lobbying of big tobacco rather than protecting kids. Now, I had 4 or 5 examples about how we've improved over the 3 or 4 decades of how we improve society in protecting kids, and we are going to give them an opportunity to have flavored tobacco and increase their poor habits. I think that I'm making a point here rather nicely, Madam Chair, and I'll continue on. This one from CBC News editorial, the highlight, it jumped right off the page at me, is a knee-jerk reaction. The Canadian Cancer Society say it is disheartening by the flavoring decision. And it goes on to point out, saying the government's amendments to this legislation would regulate e-cigarettes are a knee-jerk reaction. And to me, there is one after another that is, the editorials are the same. There's no question that they recognize that this government has had a difficult week, last week. And clearly that these editorials from across Nova Scotia are a reflection of when I go out to Remembrance Day services and have an opportunity to meet constituents after the ceremony, this is what's on their minds. It's on the minds of Nova Scotians, and it's in the editorials of our papers right across Nova Scotia. And here's one of my last editorials, Madam Chair. I know everybody's deeply interested in what I'm reading here, so I'll read this last one. November the 10th, from our local Coast Guard in Shelburne. The caption reads, "Flavored tobacco flip-flop needs another flip." And leaders in the healthcare field and organizations have been calling for a ban on flavored tobacco for years. It ends with flip-flop or flop-flip. This can't be the final word. Get it right before it goes into the books. Now, them is pretty strong words. Now, that is not a sitting MLA that may be on the opposite side, and you can understand that they're going to have a different position because they're in opposition. But these are consistent from editorials right across our province. Now, there's one thing that I learned is that the papers do a job, and they're not here to represent any one of our affiliations or our parties. They're here to write what they feel, how society feels, and they put them words to pen, and here are the results of it. And it's been consistent the whole way through. And, Madam Chair, I just want to highlight, in law amendments, I talked earlier about there was a doctor in there, and I'm really impressed with the expertise of that individual. And there was a number of individuals in there from the Canadian Cancer Society and other individuals that were very qualified. But there was one individual, and I'm sure that there was other members that had made reference to this individual, but it was a young lady of the tender age of 13 years old. And she had the courage to come before law amendments at the age of 13, and I really thought, and other people have pointed that out, the courage of that individual and speak about the protection of the youth and how cigarettes and flavored cigarettes, e-cigarettes, she was concerned deeply about that. And for that individual to come forward at that age was really impressive. And she told the government not to encourage people by these flavored cigarettes, and I think that's something that we want to pay attention to. I just have a few more minutes, Madam Chair, before I close, but I just want to recognize my background. And I want to say that I have been enrolled in the College of Hard Knocks all my life. And I'm still enrolled in that college. And probably I'll be there until the last, or the breath I have on this earth. And yeah, I probably won't graduate either, but I know that there's a number of individuals out there. But I was listening to some music as I was approaching the city here this afternoon or earlier today. And there was, yes, it was country, and the name was Vern Gosling. And the title was, "This Ain't My First Rodeo." And, but there's an interesting line in there that I want to make reference, and I can tie this into this bill. And in that song, I ask you to go Google it, because in it says, "I didn't make it all the way through school, but my mama didn't raise any fool. And I may not be no Einstein of my time, and I'm not dumb, and I'm not blind." And I can tell you that I'm not no Einstein in this house, and I'll be the first one to recognize it. I know that there's a number of lawyers, there's a number of accountants in here, and I appreciate their educational level. I'm not going there. But I can tell you and I used this before, that I have some common sense. And it is this common sense that we need to stop and reflect as we go forward. Because we need to do the right thing for the youth, the next generation. And in my time home this weekend, I went through my mail, and I had a beautiful glossy folder of the present Liberal government. And it was some beautiful pictures. I agree. The photographer needs to be commended for that. And it was a reflection. It was a reflection. It was a reflection. Madam Chair, it was a reflection of the present government's first year in office. And I'm just saying it was a beautiful, well put together portrait of pictures of the sitting members. And I recognize that. But I really think that there was one picture missing. Now, I've heard a lot of comments, but nobody's come forward with what that comment could be. And to me, there was one picture that's missing, and I know that when you do that glossy folder, you have to have some time leading up to it, and probably that was done a month earlier, at the least. Now, if there was one more picture in there and it was stopped today, I can assure you what the picture I see in there and what Nova Scotians see in there as they would move forward. The picture that I have in my mind is that the Liberal government is in bid with the big tobacco companies. Now that's an image I'll leave for your imagination, but I'll leave it there. And there is the caption of that nice glossy folder. If it was present time, it would have an additional picture in there of the present government in bid with the tobacco company. Now, I just want to finish on this, and I understand the individuals, the farmers that grow tobacco, and I don't want to leave them out. I really recognize that they have to get up and they feed their families. And I know that as a society, I talked about, we're addicted to that cash. And we have to have the courage to talk about that we want to remove that tobacco from our markets, and it's going to have a harmful effect on the farmers. But I want to give you some practical advice, Madam Chair. In the next 30 years, there's going to be 3 billion more people on this planet. 3 billion more people on this planet in 30 years. What an encouragement to tell the farmers who grow tobacco, here's a good opportunity, and we will assist you, government, we'll assist you to find new products to feed the world. What a great concept. What a great concept of saying we are going to make our society healthier, and we're going to break this addiction to our budget of $260-odd million a year that Nova Scotia depends on this tax revenue. That's the legacy that I want to leave my grandchildren. And I know that we can encourage the farmers to go in a different direction, and I recognize that. There was never any discussion on any of the speakers in the last 72 hours regarding that topic. And I want to recognize that we cannot abandon them individuals, and governments needs to stop and to reflect and give them an opportunity to go in a different direction. But what a concept is to say that we're going to move away from our addiction to our cash, and we want that, but we're going to move away and we have a healthier society. So, Madam Chair, I'm about ready to close here, but I can say that there's many things that goes to this House, and there's many opportunities that we can stand up and debate, and we can move forward. And the Premier suggested that we may be here to Christmas. I can certainly send out for my gifts and have them presented here. And I look forward to it because I want to people, to some of the questions I raised here tonight about the addiction to the tax revenue. I'd love for somebody to be able to explain that and how they can break that addiction. And I think we need to do the right thing for our youth. And I am not ashamed to say that we need to break the habit that something is harmful, not only to your own self personally, but also to the future generation. Thank you for your time.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Order, please. The honourable member for Pictou West has the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm very honored to be able to stand here and speak on Bill 60, although the bill makes me rather sad. Flavored tobacco is not welcomed in my household, nor is it welcome really in Nova Scotia. And when I think about this bill, I can't help but it just makes me feel ill. There's no good feeling about it. This bill just simply feels wrong to me. It's just an innate feeling that I have. And I don't know if it was an oversight on behalf of the Liberal Party, but I know it can be corrected. And I'm hoping that with everyone's opportunity to stand up and speak on it, that we may be able to see the light and understand that this bill has to be changed. There are challenges when trying to put any bill together and get it right. And we know that we can't always please everyone. But I am positive that everyone in this chamber can and wants to focus on ensuring that any kind of product that could do damage to our children are taken off the market as quickly as possible. And once again, that should just be innate with everyone, that you certainly don't want to put anything out there that would harm children. I'm really confused about where the consultation process took place with this bill. I think we're all hunting for the answers surrounding that. Why the sudden change of heart? And I was thinking, I was so happy with this bill at first when, you know, we knew that flavored tobacco was going to be banned, and I thought, you know, good on the Liberals, that's wonderful news. But why the sudden change of heart? I mean, when we come to work, we shouldn't leave our hearts at home, and I feel that that's what's happening right now. We're not thinking right now rationally about what this is going to do to our children. And when we have the Minister of Health and Wellness clearly and publicly admitting that there are flaws, there's a couple things that come to mind. I congratulate him on having the courage to stand forth and say that there are flaws. But then there's the bigger question is, so why doesn't the minister seek help now to make the proper changes to protect our children? Why not fix the flaws now? I mean, it's just a no-brainer to me. It simply makes no sense to just push it down the road, and it's like kicking the can down the road. I don't understand why we just can't fix it now. We know that there wasn't a lot of homework done on this, and we know that right now as it stands, it's a bad piece of legislation. And it's bad for everyone, but more importantly, it is bad for our children. And being a mother of a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, I am really deeply concerned about this bill. And I'm really, really disappointed. And, you know, before I ever got involved in politics, actually my CA had the pleasure of spending time with the Minister of Health and Wellness a few years ago. And when I got into politics, she told me about this story, about her experience with them and how polite and respectful, and she was a witness, and how after am I allowed to share the story? Oh, I thought you said, okay, and she was going on and certainly singing his praises. And the reason she was here, and I won't get into all the details, but it was with regards to children. And I will never forget her sharing that story with me and once again singing the minister's praises and how wonderful and how caring he was with regards to the situation surrounding children. And I hope, and I know that she spoke the truth, and I know that the Minister of Health, I think that every single person in this chamber knows what's right with this bill, and that is to take flavored tobacco off the shelves for good. We all know that tobacco flavorings are intended to mask from tobacco product users. So we know that, like other tobacco products, that the flavored tobacco has very serious health risks. And I don't understand why we want to expose anyone, but especially our children, to these health risks. Last week, I recall the member from Clayton Park West during question period stated that Dr. Strangs had dictated or stated that we will improve the bill later on. And I just thought to myself, well, why later on? Why not now? Why not have the courage to do it now? I don't know what's holding us back. It just seems so simple to me. I'm kind of stunned with it because I just can't understand why we're not fixing it right now. It's such an important issue. It was actually at the time I just felt what a ridiculous statement that we will, fix it later on down the road. And maybe I'm missing something, and surely something may be explained later on, and that will make me fully understand why we're not fixing it right now. I can't get it past my mind why we are not banning tobacco, flavored tobacco right now. I know a lot of people are saying, it's why the flip-flop? And the government had it right the first time, so why is there no interest right now in getting the bill back on the right track and doing the right thing? When you have young people in your household, you're hyper-aware to bills such as Bill 60. And, we know that our youth are much more likely to use flavored tobacco products than adults. We know we are, most of us sitting here know that, we're no fools to the tobacco industry and what they create, and we know that documents show that companies design and they create flavored cigarettes with kids and youth in mind. And they truly are taking advantage of their innocence. I mean, when we think about why introduce flavored tobacco, and we know of names such as, I think there was bubble gum and cherry and honey maple, and the list goes on and on. I mean, it's pretty obvious what the intentions are. These tobacco companies are, in my opinion anyway, simply disguising the bad taste of tobacco. And I've never been a smoker, but I did try. When I was 12 years old, I went into the washroom at the Hector Arena with a bunch of girlfriends, and we lit up a few cigarettes and thought we were going to smoke, and that was the first time I tried it, and it was the last time. It just didn't appeal to me. And I came from a family of where my mother was a smoker, but my mom didn't smoke until after she had all her kids. And it was kind of odd because my father smoked for years and years, and then when they started having children, Dad decided to stop smoking, and then once Mom was done having babies, she started to smoke. So I'm not sure if that was because of us being who we were, yeah. But it's I saw my mother struggle for years and years, and I saw her go through all kinds of, different experiments trying to quit. I saw her invest a lot of money and time into trying to quit. And I know at the end of the day that smoking is what took her life. And, you know, I know there was one thing that she never wanted us to do was smoke. You know, she went on, she smoked, and I know monkey see, monkey do, but she, you know, made sure that we knew that it was wrong. And I'm hoping that with everyone's voices here this evening that we can show the Liberal government that this bill is wrong. These companies are masking the taste of tobacco, and in removing the original disgusting taste, really, of tobacco, what we're doing is opening a door to the gateway of youth exploring all kinds of different substances. And sadly, this is the part that I am most frustrated with, as kids believe that flavored tobacco products are safer. They think that they're less addictive than the regular tobacco products. And I think really what we're doing here is opening Pandora's box to a lot of troubles. And I hope, Madam Speaker, that we will work hard to try to cooperate here and find a way that we can compromise and make this bill stronger to protect our children. We know that flavored tobacco products contain nicotine. We've discussed that, and which is the primary addictive chemical that makes it so hard for people to quit and to avoid this unhealthy habit. So going back to some of the health risks, we know that tobacco products cause many dangerous health risks, and this should be a concern to all of us. The warning signs are even printed on the cigarette packages, and we know that tobacco causes heart disease, oral cancer, all kinds of different cancers, and we know the list goes on. I know that across Canada, I think, anyway, from my investigating, the movement to ban tobacco products is building, and that pleases me. We have evolved, and we have become more educated, and our ultimate goal is to halt the sale of flavored tobacco in Nova Scotia, because it is the right thing to do. This can't be a partisan issue. It simply can't be. And I firmly believe everyone in this chamber wants to do the right thing. They want to make the right decisions and pass the right pieces of legislation that protects our children from harm's way. Whether we all have children or not, all of us, though, in this chamber have a moral obligation to protect children and children's health. I implore this government to be open to changing and strengthening this bill now. Don't do it months down the road. Do it now, because it matters right now. Do the right thing and fix it now and show that you care. Again, the minister said it himself, that the bill is flawed, that it is already broken. So why aren't we just pulling the bill and begin the right process by consulting and doing the proper homework that it takes to get it right, so that the minister can proudly stand up again and not have to admit that there are flaws, but that his government took the proper measures to create a bill that will ensure young people are protected. It seems pretty simple and harmless to do, so I hope that he will reconsider. I wish at times this government would put as much energy into creating a marketing strategy to protect our youth with regards to this bill, as much as the tobacco companies put forth in their marketing strategy to entice young people to smoke. Positive, healthy people recognize the necessity to come together for the better good for all. And this is one of those times that we must work together to do what is right for all Nova Scotians. Protecting our health and, of course, the health and future of our children and grandchildren is absolutely necessary and should be our #1 priority. We can't live, Madam Speaker, without having clean air, water, nutritious food, and I certainly can't live without knowing I stood up this evening to exhaust my efforts to implore this government to help the voices of those who are voiceless, those being the children, those being my children. The children who don't get to vote, but certainly are the ones who will be most affected if this bill is passed. We can go on and on about Liberal failures, but I prefer to stand here in my place and encourage the Liberal government to stand up for our children. The bill, in my opinion, rejects hope. Hope for the children that needs us to make decisions that will aid them in living a healthy and happy life in Nova Scotia. And, you know, I was thinking about when we started here about 6, 7 weeks ago. I was coming into the city, and I believe it was Quinpool Road. There was a lot of work going on there, and basically a traffic jam. And I noticed there was a young gentleman coming down one side of the cars and had his hat out, looking for you to roll down your window and give him some money. And so he walked down the passenger side of my car and kind of grinned, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be stuck here. He's going to come back up and around. And I thought, okay, I'll get some change out or whatever. And then I had just, on my way from Pictou that day, I had just gone through Tim Hortons, and I had a $10 bill that I used. So I had $5 sitting there. So when he came back up, I rolled down my window, and I was going to give him the $5. And when I rolled down the window, though, the first thing I said to him was, why aren't you in school? And he, quick as anything, said, why aren't you at work? And I just thought that was hilarious, right? He's like, why aren't you at work? And I said, I'm trying to get there. And so anyway, he had his hat there, and I was worried that I was going to have to pull away, but we seemed to be stuck there for a while. And I had a conversation with him, and I noticed that he had cigarettes on him. And I knew if I gave him the $5, that's probably where the money was going to go. But I didn't know for sure. So I said, well, you know, here's $5. I said, I hope you buy something to eat. And he said, I might just do that. And this kid was 15 years old. I got that much out of him. He was a real sweetheart. Like, at one point, I almost wanted to give him my whole purse. But, you know, he was homeless, and as I was driving away, you know, he said thank you, and I know I'm probably naive, but it was really cute. He said, I wish you were my mom. And that just really touched me. All within, you know, 5 minutes or whatever that I was stuck in traffic, I had this little conversation with this lovely young man. And I thought, I wonder who cares about him. I wonder where he's going tonight. I wonder where he's going to get his next meal. And the reason I bring him up is because, you know, I have the opportunity to sit with my children and tell them that they shouldn't do this and why they shouldn't do this, and here's the research why. But many children don't, and that's why we need to protect them. And I go back to that moral obligation, commitment that we have a duty to protect all children. I ask the members in this chamber to be strong in their convictions, and for all of you to trust your higher wisdom and look to the grander vision here, a vision for our children and grandchildren living in a smoke-free province, hopefully someday. If it means something to you, you'll find a way, and if it doesn't, you will find an excuse. So I ask, what is the Liberal government's excuse to not ban flavored tobacco? I just don't understand why we're not banning it. It seems like a simple question, but we don't seem to be able to get an answer. And I guess all I can think of is our youth, do they matter? And I know they do. And I honestly, I still believe, no matter what happens here, I know when I walk out of this chamber, I don't believe there's one person in here that believes that we should have flavored tobacco. I really don't. I was lucky that on the weekend I had some time, and I hope everyone else had a little break as well with family members. And I know everyone was busy attending Remembrance Day services, and I was lucky, though, to have an opportunity to spend some time with my children and go through my pile of mail. And as I was going through my mail, there was an MSI form there to renew my son's health card. And of course, on the card, it asks whether or not you want to donate all your organs. And he's 12, and I thought, you know what, I will go through this process and ask him how he feels about it. And he had a couple of his friends over. And as we are going through, you know, he's like, oh, yeah, no, I want you to, Mom, write everything, all my organs, whatever I can do to help anyone, that would be great. And one of his other little buddies spoke up and said, well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to give all, if the person was a good person, I'd want them to have all my organs, but I don't know, if they were a criminal or something, I don't think I want to give those my organs. So this is his little friend, you know. And I said, really? You know, you don't believe that maybe they deserve a second chance as well? You know, and he kind of looked at me and he thought, and then he said to my son, he said, well, Jack, what do you think? You know, and Jack said, no, I think, Bailey, I think everyone deserves a second chance. And it just reminded me a little bit of this bill, because I believe this is the minister's second chance to get it right and to do what's right for our children. You know, things are only impossible until we decide they're not. It is possible to change this bill and do the right thing. And, you know, we can unite on it, we can collaborate on it, but I don't even think we have to do that, because I believe that this government is wise enough to know what they should do. I was, you know, amazed with the projections that I viewed that show the amount of tobacco taxes. And the number, I think, 226 million was thrown out. And, you know, I truly, truly hope that the Liberal government is not basing this decision on that rich financial projection. And I look forward to them, you know, standing up and explaining that. I know that out of the $226 million in taxes, from tobacco taxes, that is, that approximately, I think, 10 million is collected from flavored tobacco. That is a lot of money, and I know that the past member from the NDP that spoke, I think that he had made a lot of sense there. Are we, you know, putting the financial gain ahead of knowing and doing what's best for our children? And that worries me. So I hope that we can try and recognize together that everyone's right to live in a healthy environment is possible, and that we can all be part of that. Maybe, as the other member, the leader of the NDP spoke, you know, that maybe this party is in denial. She spoke of the 9 Ds, and the one that stood out with me was the word denial. So I hope that we take some more time here and listen to everyone's voices, and possibly we can get back on track and do what's right. We need to put our energy towards creating a smoke-free Nova Scotia. In my opinion, we need to arm ourselves to fight the tobacco companies that have basically flooded the market with a wide range of candy and fruit-flavored tobacco products that appeal to our youth. Everyone knows that menthol cigarettes are a starter product for our youth, and proportionally more youth use menthol cigarettes than adults, which is a scary fact as well. I know that the latest Health Canada survey data shows that menthol cigarettes are the second most popular flavored tobacco product amongst school children. And I would hope that we can all make bold decisions here, like governments did almost nearly a decade ago, I believe now, that to ban smoking in public places. And I think that was one of the wisest decisions that our province made. And I don't even recall, I don't know if it was on a municipal level or provincial level. I think we need to step back here and ask ourselves, what is our goal here? Is it to help our youth to refrain from smoking? Because that's what I hope it is. I'm going to finish off on asking everyone in this chamber to step back and reflect on why they're here, and to ask themselves what is it that they want to accomplish in the chamber, in their time. And when I think about this, I think, you know, what will I leave behind in the hearts and minds of others when I depart from this chamber, when this career is over, when I leave this world? And that comes to the word that was used earlier, is I'm wondering what legacy is it that everybody hopes to leave? And I will, you know, ask the minister, what does he want to leave behind in this chamber? And is he looking to be able to touch others with his legacy? And I hope that he will reconsider his thoughts on this. And I also just want to state that no matter what happens, no matter what decision is made in this chamber regarding Bill 60, I know that my kids come first. It's that simple. And I hope that this government will be convinced that all children are worthy. And one way of showing the children of Nova Scotia that they are worthy is banning flavored tobacco. And on that note, I will take my seat. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that. I believe that I do have an answer for my colleague from Pictou West. I just listened to her very poignant speech, and where she was questioning the government why they would not ban flavored tobacco and menthol tobacco. And I believe it comes down to simply, show me the money. Show me the money. This is a famous line that most of us recognize from the 1996 movie Jerry Maguire. And this is what this bill is about. Show me the money. And unfortunately, it is about that. When you're talking about and you hear the numbers of the large tobacco companies and the control that they have had over society for many, many years, too many years. And also the fact that it is a major revenue generator for the province of Nova Scotia. And I know that it's difficult in terms of being in government and looking at the books and balancing the books, but I would really hope that there wouldn't be a government in this province that would balance the books on the health of our children and youth. And you need to really analyze that and look at that, because it's quite interesting when you stand in the House and during question period that you hear the Finance Minister and the Minister of Health saying, oh, we need to do more consultation. Well, there was a strategy that was initiated back in 2011, and back in 2011, the department was looking at, you know, what are we going to do with tobacco? And we also knew that the federal government was looking at it. And it is unfortunate that there's members in the Liberal government that feel that that everything changes if you point the finger at another party and say, oh, you could have done this, you could have done that. Well, they're going to have their time when people are going to say the same thing to them, because you make decisions based on the information that you have of the day. And we knew that when we were looking at those type of strategies, and we were working towards that, and that's like my colleague from Halifax Needham had said, is that everyone has a responsibility when they get in the position of government to take that responsibility and move forward and do their piece of work. And it's come to the point in our society that the government, the Liberal government, it's their responsibility now to do that piece of work. They worked very hard to get into that position, so now take the responsibility and don't point the finger back at others, because that turn will come for you someday when people will be standing on the government side and say, why didn't you look at this? Why didn't you look at that? Because there's so many things that can be done within any government department. And Madam Speaker, you have to also look at the fact that it wasn't the other parties coming out pounding their chest saying we're going to go the preventative route, we are going to come in with some of the harshest tobacco laws in all of Canada, and then turn and go the other direction. It wasn't the parties on this side that did that. It was the government of the day that made that decision. And they need to take responsibility for that decision and backtrack. But once again, it's unfortunate because it's a legacy. It's a legacy that will be left. I know that they're saying that, oh, well, we'll make changes in the future. Well, it's interesting when I sit in this House and I listen to them discuss other bills and say such things as, well, we're going to pass this bill. We're not going to listen to the opposition because we got to do it right away. We got to take care of this right away. We can fix up the bill later. We can make amendments, but we'll do it right away. Well, what's the difference with this bill? What's the difference with Bill 60? In the fact that we know, and the evidence shows so strongly, how our youth and our children are affected by flavored tobacco and menthol tobacco. Like, the evidence is there. And when I hear people in leadership positions say we're going to consult more, well, who are you going to consult with? There's been so much consultation in our province and throughout Canada, in the United States, throughout the world with respect to flavored tobacco. The only one that I can think, Madam Speaker, they're going to consult with is the 12-year-old that is sucking back on a bubbled flavored tobacco. Who else are you going to consult? And unfortunately, it's those very children that we should be protecting. The very children that we should be protecting. And, you know, when you look at the evidence, there's so much there. We have all sorts of research. It says that more than half of teenage smokers use flavored tobacco products. It's from a study. I didn't make it up. It's a study that proves that our teenagers are using flavored tobacco. And you know, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see how they market this. With tobacco companies, the pretty little pictures to make them look like candy, to make them look like fruit roll-ups. They smell like bubble gum. But you know what? They might smell like bubble gum, Madam Speaker. They may smell like cherry, but they kill like tobacco. They kill like tobacco. No one here can deny that. You have watermelon flavored. You have maple syrup. Can you imagine maple syrup? You know, one of the researchers who actually goes about throughout Canada and speaks against flavored tobacco has a 5-year-old daughter, and she actually said to her child, she offered not her to smoke one, to smell one. And it was a candy-flavored one. The 5-year-old said, "Oh, Mommy, that smells so delicious. That smells so delicious." Well, I'm a parent. I would have never, ever dreamed that I would not try to protect my child from a flavored tobacco product. We can't be with them 24/7, you know, when they get the age of 12. And I was shocked when I did my research, Madam Speaker, to learn, because I'm not a smoker. I've never smoked. And I'm very fortunate that I haven't smoked. But I grew up in a family where my aunt and uncle and grandmother smoked. And my aunt and uncle died from smoking, I will tell you that. I've seen what it's done. And then my grandmother died from smoking. So I see where that goes. And that was during an era when there wasn't flavored tobacco. That was the plain old yucky tasting stuff. and yet they continue to smoke because of the strength and the addiction of that nicotine. How can we allow our children to try that? Each and every day that goes by that we do not bring in legislation is each and every day that there's more children trying it. At age 12, that's what I was going, well, the Minister of Finance says it's against the law, but boy, oh boy, there's some reason why they have all this research and know that kids are doing it. So we're just putting our heads in the sand to say, oh, it's against the law. It's against the law. But these kids are getting it. These kids are getting it, and it's very irresponsible to say, oh, well, it's against the law, and thinking that we know it's against the law to drink under 19. How many children are killed or youth in car accidents from drinking and driving? It's against the law, but they're dying. Where is the difference? Let's look at where is the difference, So, we're here in a position of responsibility. And I have to say, I do feel bad for the Minister of Health, because I know and I do truly believe within myself that he was very genuine on the start of his campaign of telling people of Nova Scotia that he was going to get rid of flavoured tobacco products in our province. And he has talked for many years in opposition about preventative medicine, if there is a reason, and a good reason, why we're going to let our children access this product continually until this supposedly golden date of May 31st of next year, it would be really nice to know the reason, because the only thing that comes to my mind is show me the money. That's the only thing that comes to my mind, and I think that's a shame when we're talking about children. We have to take the blinders off, and I do know that I do understand that it is difficult when you're in a government position and there's many pulls every which way, and you have, the big tobacco companies that are putting pressure on convenience stores, because that is, and I do understand that in terms of business, but do we sacrifice the health and lives of our youth and our society based on that? There is points that when we have decisions in government to make, many of them are very difficult. And I will give you that. They are difficult, and you never seem like you're doing the right thing. But with this issue, there is a right way to go. And that's what we're talking about here. That's what people are asking for. And as my colleague from Pictou West said again, it's not about the politics, it's about the reality of life. And people aren't making up these research studies. They're actual facts, Madam Speaker. And one of the things that we do know about the tobacco companies is that they are marketing smart. They have this ability to get others to do their dirty work for them. And we know that. Every one of us sitting in here know that. It's big bucks. It's show me the money. It's a lot of money. And they were even, and as the information has also shown, that they were able to get around the federal law. Got to give credit where credit is due. The federal government made an attempt, and unfortunately that attempt did not work, because the tobacco companies have a lot of money, can hire many, many lawyers that can go through the legislation. They have people, I don't know if people are aware of this, but there's people that from the big tobacco companies that are in the Parliament all the time just listening and trying to pick up information of what the federal government's going to do and with respect to the big tobacco bills that may affect them negatively, right? I mean, it's a big thing. It's almost like a mafia when you want to come to think about it, and the dollars that they generate. And why do you think that they package the flavored tobaccos in the way that they do? Why do you think that they display them in the way they do, with pretty colors, and to make them look like candy bars and make them look like there's something attractive. I was even reading, Madam Speaker, that some of the tobacco companies have even changed the size of the flavored tobaccos to make them look slender because of that key word in our society for young women to be slender. Like there's a lot of psychological analysis that goes into the marketing of products. It's a real science, Madam Speaker, and it is a science that the tobacco companies have won the war on. And as a society, we have to stand up to that. And I know that it's difficult to hear when you're in government position. It's difficult for those who are in government that may be teachers, may be parents, you know, be volunteer in their community with children. It's got to be difficult for the Minister of Health. Because as I said, I truly believe our minister really wanted to make a difference. I really believe that. And I'm saying it because I do believe he wanted to make a difference, and I find it so unfortunate of the turn. And if there's a really good reason for that, you know, and the fact is that the government talked about before election and afterwards that they were going to be the most transparent and open government that the province has ever seen. Well, here is an issue that truly the government can be transparent. Come out and tell the people of the province, why you've made this change. Give a reason for it. That's what transparency is all about, is telling others why you've made a change in a decision. And that's what we're asking. Like, you know, if you're not going to change this bill, you have this magic date in mind that you're going to bring legislation forward. There's this magic date. Can we have a reason for that? And the other issue with flavored tobacco, of course, you've heard here in the House, is about menthol and how menthol really attracts the younger crowd and the younger adults to try tobacco products. When you look at the 12-year-olds, you're talking about the flavor. We're talking about flavored tobacco and how those cherry flavors and bubble gum attract them. When you get into our young adults, it's the menthol flavor. And it's the menthol flavor because of the fact that it doesn't have such a harsh taste. It's got a little bit of a better taste, and that's why for beginner smokers. And there's information on that. I have a piece here that says that studies show that menthol is the most effective gateway nicotine product for beginner smokers. And that has been confirmed by the tobacco industry themselves, as well as independent scientists. Well, you know, the tobacco companies know that because that's part of the marketing game. That is why they market the menthol products, and they know that that will attract that particular group in our society. As I said, take the opportunity. I'll encourage the members in the government just to Google flavored tobaccos and see all the information that comes up about it. And none of it's good. All of it is talking about how our society has to get rid of it. You know, we can't wait. We can't wait. You know, to say that the bill, there will be a strong bill next May is not fast enough. It is not fast enough. How many children are going to become addicted to that product and carry their smoking addiction through to adulthood and then to an early death? You know, how many over that time frame? So as the discussion goes in this House, as I mention often, it's very strange how some bills, the conversation being made here is that we have to do something now, and then the other bills, it's just all, I guess, about the convenience and all about show me the money. And from the fact that I know the other members are going on about, oh yeah, this is super convenient. Well, there has to be a really good reason. because it has to be show me the money, because what else would drive a government to make a turnaround in a decision that was very public to the people of the province that they represent? There has to be something. And it's not consultation. No one is going to fool anybody else about the consultation, because there's been plenty of that and enough research. So what else could it be? And if the government doesn't want to provide a reasonable answer to the people of Nova Scotia, then the assumption has to be it's about the money, and it's about the big tobacco company and the taxes. So what you have to look at is, as I said, there's lots of studies when you Google flavored tobacco. And one interesting pieces of information is that this just reconfirms what we've all been saying. Among Canadian teens who report using tobacco, more than half are opting for products infused with such flavors as bubblegum, cherry, or watermelon. And that's a study has shown that. And part of what the tobacco companies have been striving for in their flavored tobacco is to make it more tastier, but less taste, that it doesn't taste like tobacco. Isn't that ironic? I mean, that's what they've been working towards, and that they've met their goal by inventing flavored tobacco. And, you know, they make it and they market it to youth specifically and knowingly. You know, it would maybe it'd be a little bit different if the whole, you know, tobacco is bad no matter which way you look at it. But, you know, the fact is if we lived in a society that tobacco was just primarily marketed to adults who can make those decisions on their own, but that's not it. And even the tobacco companies have admitted to that. The research has shown that. They are purposely picking out a very vulnerable group of people in our society, our children, that we protect. That's what, as adults, life is all about, to protect our children and other children in our society. And there's absolutely no denying that the flavored tobacco is something that the children pick up. And you know, we all know ourselves. Just let's think back when we were teenagers and the pressure that we felt about being a part of the crowd, you know, that the importance that we wanted to fit in with our friends, and the pressure, even back in our days, to pick up a cigarette and be one of the cool ones there smoking a cigarette, you know. And can you imagine in today's world with all the technology, all the internet, our children know all things that we never even thought we would even know. My son's always saying he is the prince of random facts, because he will start telling me things or say things, and I'll say, well, where did you get that from? Well, of course, he learned it on the internet, and everything we learn on the internet we believe is true. And, you know, the impression that our children get from adults, we know that many children will smoke if their parents are smokers, because they're watching mom and dad. Because that's what life is about. We bring children in the world and we want to comfort them and bring them up and have them be the best that they can. And we've picked up bad habits over our lifetime, and we'll say, that's why you always hear a child saying, well, you're telling me not to do this, but you used to do it, or you're doing it now. You know, and we strive to make sure that our children are going to have a better life than ourselves. And so we do have a responsibility as adults. We have responsibilities as politicians. We have responsibilities as teachers in the world. We have responsibility as parents, as healthcare workers, as ministers of health. as government leaders, we have a responsibility to those kids. And, you know, whatever excuse there is to hold off any kind of legislation to ban flavored tobacco, I can't think of it being a good excuse. Because show me the money means nothing at the end of the day if we're burying people premature, or people are in the hospital system because of lung cancer and smoking-related diseases. All those things accumulate. And we need to stand up in society and take a responsibility for that. And I thought that that's what this government was doing. When we were sitting in law amendments and everybody was on the same page, you know, and I know even some members of the government were emailing and tweeting that same thing to people who were saying that were wondering about the bill and wondering how it would affect them with the e-cigarettes and stuff. And we had government members saying, well, you're not going to get anywhere with this one because we're all on the same page. Well, I don't know what happened to that page. Somebody turned the page and they turned it the wrong way, because that's not the situation we have right now. And, you know, as I said, I was fortunate that I never took up smoking, but I can remember when my grandmother, Nanny, used to get me at 7 years old, and this is like my colleague next to me was talking about how different society was years ago and what we would accept then that we won't accept now. And I used Nan used to give me a call and say, will you go down to the corner store and get me a package of cigarettes? I think I was 7 years old, and I used to do the little trip to the corner store to get the package of cigarettes. If I only knew at that age that I was actually killing my grandmother, I would have refused. But I used to get that little 5 cents that I could get some penny candy, and I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. But that was a society where even at one time doctors told people that having a smoke or two is going to actually help their health and not affect their health. Boy, were they wrong. Boy, were they ever wrong. Well, that's what's happening right now. Boy, is the Liberal government ever wrong for not bringing that bill in now. Are they ever wrong? And, you know, I've had the opportunity to work for nonprofit groups that fight very hard for a smoke-free society. I've had the pleasure to work for the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and I've also had the pleasure to work for the Canadian Cancer Society here in the province of Nova Scotia. And what a great pleasure it was to work for both of those organizations with the dedicated individuals that every day when they come to work, that they're working towards preventative medicine in our society and looking at how we get rid of heart disease and strokes, and how are we going to combat smoking and the diseases around that. And every day that they go to work, and I'm sure even the days that they're not in the office, that that's on their mind, because they really know. They do the research, they do the studies, they do the advocacy work, they do the government relationship, and what a disappointment it must be for those two provincial and national organizations to think that they were just so close to getting a piece of legislation that they could have been so proud of and say, our relationship with this Liberal government, look what we were able to accomplish. We have a minister that stood up against the big tobacco companies. He did not back down. Show me the money didn't mean a thing to the government or to that minister, and we now are taking flavored tobacco out of the hands of our children and our youth. I'm sure that they were ecstatic when it got as far as law amendments and they were able to be a part of the audience and be part of the presentation and give that presentation, and thinking that all their hard work was going to be wrapped up with a real nice bow. Well, what did they get? What did they get? And what a shame, a real shame. And whether or not the government comes out with their legislation next year in May, it's never going to change history. It's not going to change the fact of what we're going through right now is in the books forever. It's a legacy for it's not going to change. And that's unfortunate. There's still an opportunity, there's certainly an opportunity for the government to say, yes, we have listened to the opposition, we listened to the Cancer Society, we listened to the doctors, we listened to the doctor that came in and graphically talked about how he's cut people's tongues out because they were cancerous. You know, the fact is that to make a change, again, is not an embarrassment. You would look like heroes for doing that because of all the pressure. And I think that people understand the pressures because we've had many discussions here about where those pressures are coming from and how difficult it is to deal with those pressures. And I've had that experience. It is not an easy job, and I'm sure there's days that you feel that, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through another day of people criticizing this? And it's not easy. But I'll tell you, if you sit and think and discuss as a caucus of what it really will do for our society, which is the most important, and even do politically, because people will turn around and say, they listened. That's what they told us they were going to do when they were knocking on our doors. And perhaps there was a moment that changed for them, but boy, I'll tell you, they listened again, because I'm sure that you're not only hearing from us, I'm sure that those who have relationships with you in the school systems, those who have relationships with you in the healthcare system, those from the local community health boards, along with the editorials that are in the newspapers, right through to those fabulous organizations like the Cancer Society and Heart and Stroke, the Lung Association. They would be patting you on the back for having the bravery to make that decision again and change back to the way it should be. And so you can proudly stand there and truly take credit for bringing in some of the strongest legislation in all of Canada. It's not enough to stand there and say that you're doing it because of the e-cigarettes. Those are fairly new products in our society. But the flavored tobaccos, which started in the late 90s, and the menthol cigarettes that have been around for a very long time, it's the government, it's the provincial government that will come out of the starting block waving their flag saying, we are the ones who have stand tall on that. And that's not going to be a legacy for this government if you do not have those discussions and say, you know, let's bite the bullet. We made a boo-boo on this one. We're going to turn around and we're going to make those amendments to the legislation, and we are going to have the strongest legislation, whether it's about money or not. Don't show me the money, show me the health of our province is what your slogan will be, and people will really appreciate that, and I believe the parties here would appreciate that, because that's what we're standing here for. That's what we're talking about. And as my colleague said, and I know that my colleague from Pictou West, I'm using my colleague's name a lot tonight, because she said a lot of really important points, and she talked from the heart. She has young children, she knows, and she has children at the age that would start picking up those products and using them. So I'm sure there's a fear there in her life that one of her children may be doing that, right? And one of the things that my colleague had pointed out was the fact that let's not do this as a political game here. This is about our society, and this is what's right in our society. And whether or not my colleague from Pictou West is in another political party, and I'm praising her, it's the fact that she said truthful words, and she deserves the credit. Everyone that stood over there and said that, they may be opposition to us too, a different party, but the fact is they speak the truth, and they spoke from the heart. And that's what I wish would come from the government, speaking from the heart. If they're not able to bring this legislation forward until May. Why? Give us a good reason why. That's an explanation, not just to the political parties, but an explanation to all of Nova Scotians, an explanation to the Canadian Cancer Society, an explanation to the Heart and Stroke Society, an explanation to the Lung Association of Nova Scotia, an explanation to the health care industry of Nova Scotia, an explanation to the surgeons that are cutting people's tongues out because they're cancerous, right? So that's what we're talking about here. And, you know, another interesting fact that I think that we need to take into account with the young people is, once again, is back to the menthol cigarettes. And this was a study done at Waterloo University. And they just recently published in the Canadian, it's a Cancer Causes and Control journal, found that young people who smoke menthol cigarettes were almost three times more likely to say that they would continue the habit, and also would puff more per day compared to kids who smoke non-menthol brands. 3 times more likely. Like, how much more evidence do we need? But unfortunately, you know, I hear some laughter, and I hope it's not laughter over this, because this is serious. And one of the things that I want to say in conclusion, Madam Speaker, and this comes from the Canadian Cancer Society. The Canadian Cancer Society calling on, and I will table this, on Nova Scotians to take action against flavored tobacco products. And this was written on September 10th, 2014, not too long ago. And it's a report. And it talks about the number of high school students in the province of Nova Scotia that use tobacco products within a 30-day period. I'm sure the minister is familiar with it, and the use of the flavored tobacco. And Kelly Cole of the Manager of Government Relations and Canadian Cancer Society Nova Scotia Division, which I'm sure that the minister is very aware of this fine lady and all her efforts, and the Canadian Cancer Society. And as I mentioned earlier, how I'm sure there was a great excitement in conversations with the minister when this legislation was being put together, and the discussions about how strong the legislation would be in our province. And this is one of the quotes that at that time, now you got to reflect that this was back in September when the Canadian Cancer Society, the Nova Scotia Division, was under the impression that our government and our minister was going to be coming forward with this legislation. And it was stronger legislation in order to ban flavored tobacco products. And the fact is that the menthol flavored tobacco products, I'm not sure if that was on the radar screen, but it would have been certainly something that we would have brought up in the House here as amendment to that. And in this particular article, it says, this past spring, Health Minister Leo Clavine stated his intention to introduce legislation...
Order, please. Order. All right. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So it says the Health Minister stated his intention to introduce legislation that would ban the sale of flavored tobacco in Nova Scotia. And they say, their quote from the Canadian Cancer Society Nova Scotia Division is that we commend the Health Minister for taking this important step forward, protecting future generations from the devastating effects of tobacco-related disease. We look forward to seeing the introduction of this bill when the legislature resumes in October, is the comment. But I guess that legacy will never be seen in this province. The legacy that is going to be left is a government that backed down because all they could think of was show me the money. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Northside Westmount.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, Madam Chair, it's not a bill that I'd like to get up and speak on. I was wishing that we didn't have to speak on this bill. I thought after a lot of amendments that with an amendment that was going to come in, it was going to take out the menthol out of the flavored tobacco side. Rumor was that the e-cigarette stuff will be dealt with at a later date. And I think most groups, at least the groups that we talked to or heard from law amendments, were happy that that was going to happen. But then, Mr. Speaker, Madam Chair, we had a change of heart. When the amendment came out, it put menthol back in and put flavored tobacco back in. You know, Madam Chair, I've been sitting listening to this debate since it started. We've had some late nights, some early days, and I've heard of the strengths of previous governments of all stripes that had introduced legislation to ban tobacco in public places. Next government come in, strengthen it up a little bit. Next government can strengthen it up a little bit more. I can remember back when I was younger, going into the doctor's office and the doctor was smoking a cigarette when he was examining you. Pat Dunn was only young at that time, the member from Pictou Centre. But I can remember that. And as previous members said, going out as a student in university and coming back at the end of the night and waking up in the morning and getting a whiff in your room of old stale cigarette smoke. You'd have to take your clothes out and I know some days I think you'd have to burn them. And it's been a real treat now to have the Smoke-Free Places Act, where in public places there's no smoking allowed anymore. And you know, it's almost like you go somewhere now and a person who smokes is an outcast, which is what we're trying to achieve. And I have lots of friends of mine that smoke, that still smoke, and I have lots of them that are trying to get off the cigarettes, and they're using e-cigarettes, and they're using Nicorettes. And I've actually done some acupuncture on people to help quit smoking, and with good results, but the person has to quit. And then it's to battle the addiction of nicotine, the addiction of all the carcinogens that are in tobacco. But the best thing for quitting, Madam Chair, is not to start them at all. I'm fortunate to never have smoked cigarettes. Of course, as a kid, like everybody else in this chamber, supposedly had tried it. Unfortunately, I didn't know about flavored tobacco at that time because I didn't like it, and I thought it was disgusting. And Madam Chair, I sat in law amendments the very first day the law amendments sat. And I listened to presenter after presenter after presenter. But the one that got me, Madam Chair, was a 13-year-old girl who came, I forget her name, was Marika, I think it was. And she came and sat in that chair, and she spoke like she was an adult, and she spoke in protection of her peers. And Madam Chair, to listen to her speak and ask the government to eliminate flavored tobacco and menthol tobacco to protect her generation, because she felt that her generation were ones of experimenters, and she sees them on the school ground smoking now, and she begged the government to eliminate the flavored tobacco so that temptation, I guess, wouldn't be there, and that they wouldn't never get started in smoking cigarettes and having to deal with the addiction and to get off of them at a later date. If they're fortunate enough to be able to get off them, some kind of a cancer-related illness doesn't affect them before that and cost them any number of illnesses or cause them any number of illnesses. And I heard from people over and over and over that flavored tobacco is a gateway for children. Menthol is a gateway for females. It's easier on your throat. And we only heard from one group of people defending keeping flavored tobacco, and that was the big tobacco groups. So, and we understand that they have a big stake in this game. They make a lot of money off of cigarettes, and unfortunately, it's a repeat business, but the repeaters in this business usually die off for some kind of illness. So they have to make sure they get more people to start, more people to start. And Madam Chair, when you get these people to start, if you get them to start at a young age, they've got a number of years that they're going to be able to continue to do that. And once that addiction takes hold of you, I'm told it's one of the worst addictions a person could have. So, again, I heard that they were going to do an amendment to the bill, that the rumor was the menthol was coming out. Most people were happy. And when it came in, the menthol was still there. They put the flavored tobacco back in there. So the question is, as everybody else has asked here, is why did that happen? They say it doesn't come into effect till May of next year, so why would be the hurry to put that back? And then I also heard that, you know, that's going to be the strongest legislation in the country. And Madam Chair, I sure hope it is. I'm fortunate that my children are beyond the age now that they're adults. To my knowledge, they've never smoked, and they've never ever even thought about smoking. I know I grew up in a household where my dad smoked and my mom smoked, and Mom was a healthcare worker who got off them when she was pregnant with us, and off and on a little bit over time. But my dad used to always say that he doesn't do a lot else, and that's one of the things that he really enjoys. And then when he started to get a few health issues, it wasn't that he enjoyed it anymore, it's that he couldn't do it. And the thing with him was, we used to say to him as kids, is, "You should quit that, Dad." And he told us he quit 25 times a day. Because after every cigarette he had, he said it was disgusting and he didn't want to have another one, but that addiction had gotten him. He started as a young boy and just couldn't do it. And I know a lot of people who struggle with that type of addiction. But Madam Chair, when I was growing up, it was the advertisements that were on TV and in the magazines. If you go to the dentist's office, and there'd be a magazine there. And some would argue that we just looked at the pictures, and probably as kids you did. And what did you see? You seen a fancy car and a lady standing by with a cigarette, and you see them all dressed up. And I guess at that time, and at risk of sounding sexist, it was a sexy thing to see women smoking cigarettes. And that's what young women wanted to be, like those things. And young men at the time, they wanted to be part of the crowd, I guess, so they started smoking as well. And I can remember as a kid, kids in my neighborhood, that's what they did. They'd steal their father's cigarettes or their mother's cigarettes, or they'd go to the store, and you could buy, at that time, you could buy a loose cigarette. And you could buy it, I think it was at that time, it was a nickel a cigarette. You could go to the store. I am old. And that would be the big thing, to go to a store down the street from us. There was the Beachhead Dairy. We called it Dunk Store because the gentleman that owned it was an ex-military guy. His name was Duncan Winfield. And you could buy loose cigarettes. And I know as a child, when money was tough, you'd have to do that for your parents someday. Go get 2 or 3 cigarettes because that's all they could afford, but they had to have that cigarette because of the addiction. And now, Madam Chair, that culture has been turned around. Successive governments have been able to strengthen the laws, and healthcare professionals and medical professionals have been able to convince people that now it's taboo, it's a risk to your health. So the question is why are we leaving flavored tobacco in it? Why is this in the bill? And you know, the big thing that most people had when this happened was the menthol part of the bill. Get rid of the menthol, because menthol is the longest standing and the most prominent flavor used in cigarettes in Canada and any other markets. And the talk is that the manufacturers use menthol to reduce the harshness of the cigarette smoke. So if it's disgusting, reduce the harshness and it gets a better flavor. We also heard menthol is medicinal. Madam Chair, it's hard to buy that argument if it's medicinal when you're putting the toxins and the carcinogens and the tar and the nicotine and the smoke in your system. Just leave the menthol there because it's easier. And you know, flavored tobacco products, including menthol, as well as mint or candy-flavored, fruit-flavored cigarettes, are often packaged in bright-colored wrappers, and they're very strongly scented. I know as a kid, there was a gentleman in the neighborhood who smoked cigars. And I don't know what flavor cigar it was, but in the summertime when you'd be out playing and he'd be out in the yard smoking his cigar, you could smell it in the air. And you'd have to admit it smelled good. So there's a reason that this stuff is flavored and why it smells good. It's to entice people to do it. You know, among youth tobacco users, over 52% of the Canadian grade 9 to 12 students reported using flavored products, and 32% of the youth cigarette smokers smoked menthol cigarettes in the last 30 days. That's grade 9 to 12. That's 15-year-old children, Madam Chair. And I'm sure that members on the other side who have young children, it's the last thing they want to see is their children smoking. I know when I used to have friends who had children that were young and you'd see them smoking, the question was, do you tell the parents and get yourself in trouble because the parents wouldn't believe you, or do you tell them to try and get the kids to stop at that age before it gets to be an addiction? And I was always under the impression that if it was my children that were doing that, I'd like someone to tell me, so I used to be able to tell them. And you know, most people appreciated that, because the best way to quit is not to start at all. And you know, if we make it easier for children to get their hands on this flavored tobacco, or we make it easier for people to be able to inhale the smoke from the tobacco by putting the flavoring of menthol, that addiction has already started. So I applaud the minister for saying he's going to take the time to get it right. But I'd also like to see them take the flavored tobacco out now, and if it's something we can do to strengthen it later, then let's do that then. I'm sitting in the legislature here and I'm listening to different arguments on different bills that are coming before the House, and one of them that we had an amendment to was the Motor Vehicle Act. And I commend the minister for bringing this bill forward, but as we've heard, there's a few flaws in the bill. And one of the arguments was that we put a bill in that the supervisory driver should be sober. And I guess there's a court challenge that's going on later on. And
Order, please. I'd like to remind the honourable member to please keep on topic of this bill, Bill 60. Thank you. Member for Northside Westmount.
And Madam Chair, what I'm getting at is that we can put this stuff in the bill now and strengthen it later. Let's get this out of the hands of children now. Let's get people there not to start this. Now, if there's something that we can do later, or if we're flawed later, then let's bring an amendment into it later, or change the bill altogether. We're not against changing bills in this legislature. We brought some good bills, good ideas forward on these bills, but there's some people aren't open to listen to that. And Madam Chair, I hope that the people on the other side that have children or grandchildren will get up and speak to how this bill is going to prevent their children from smoking, or their grandchildren. Because I know everybody in this legislature deeply cares about, hopefully, children and their own children. And I think by introducing and maintaining flavored tobacco, it's not something that we want to see our children start with. And like I said, we want to see it get it done right, but we have to start somewhere. So let's start by taking the flavors out. And you know, they say that it's illegal for children to have cigarettes, they can't buy them. But Madam Chair, they're getting them somewhere. And the fact that they're getting them just tells me that if they're not on the market, if they're banned altogether, they can't get them. Then it's a little more of a task to get that stuff. It has to come from another area. It comes outside of our province. And if it takes that much to get it, they're going to get it anyway. So let's ban it now from our stores here. And let's work towards keeping it out of the hands of our children. You know, when they introduced this bill a couple of weeks ago, we were quite excited that the ban on flavored tobacco was there. The menthol was still there, and that's what we heard. But then when it flip-flopped over the other way, many people were scratching their heads and wondering why. They didn't take the menthol out, they kept the flavored tobacco in. And like I say, it's shown that this is the gateway for children and new smokers, not just children either, Madam Chair, new smokers to try tobacco. And we know that young people are increasingly using products like flavored tobacco, and it encourages them to try other types of tobacco. If it gets easy to smoke, it gets easy to inhale, they'll try the non-flavored, and they'll try other forms of tobacco and tobacco products. But something happened between October the 24th and today. Yeah, but they put flavored tobacco back in the bill. And that, to me, Madam Chair, is taking away from a bill that was strong, that we wanted to see stronger, but then it's been weakened. And as we've heard from members from Chester St. Margaret's, and we've heard from Queen Shelburne, there's only one reason that might have been the case. And Madam Chair, I hope I'm wrong, and I hope they're wrong, and I hope it's not because of the tax revenue that we can use here in the province, because we can find other ways to do that. You know, if we could concentrate on putting people to work and getting revenue from taxes that way, we wouldn't have to worry about the tax revenue from the cigarettes that people are buying today. And I know that it's a big part of our money that we use to run the province, and that money goes into the general coffers. But what effect is that having on our healthcare system? You know, I heard some numbers be thrown around earlier about the cost of tobacco-related illnesses in our healthcare system, and it's phenomenal. So, do we take the money from taxes and put it back out in revenue for treatments on cancer-related illnesses? I think we'd be better off if we prevented that from keeping these tobacco products out of the hands of young people and old people who want to start it. I listen in law amendments, Madam Chair, and from what I heard from law amendments is, and I heard in question period was the Premier talking about e-cigarettes and e-juices. It seems like he's concentrating on e-cigarettes and e-juices. And I heard in law amendments, and I spoke to a few of the people that did presentations there, that yes, some of the e-juices have nicotine in them, most of them have natural products in them. So I asked the question in law amendments, if they have natural products in them and they're not that bad for you, why do they have childproof caps? Why does it say on it to use gloves? And why does it have all kinds of warnings on it? And I was told it's because in doses that are in the containers you buy, it's very harmful for young children. So if those juices are harmful, what are the cigarettes doing to our children? Because they have hundreds of other chemicals in them that we don't know, that we can't see, that when they're burned, they react differently. And everybody that we spoke to wanted to ban the flavored tobacco. The doctors, the cancer specialists, the Cancer Society, the health boards. I mean, even the child that was in there, Madam Chair, that spoke like an adult, that was very well-rounded for her age, spoke about banning the flavored tobacco to protect their generation. And when you can get a child in there to tell you that this bill is wrong, I think it's something we should listen to. And you know what? We can stand there and tell our children that it's not right to smoke, and it's not this, and it's not that. But if we're not doing our part as legislators in this legislature, why do we think that they're going to listen to us? You know, we can't stop kids from talking amongst themselves, and we can't stop them from getting this stuff if it's on the market. But if it's banned, then that's one of the ways we can do it. You know, we can try and convince our children that it's not right, but we have the best way to do that right here in this legislature now, to ban that flavored tobacco and send a message to children and first-time smokers that it's not the thing to do. You know, when you've got flavored tobacco that's aimed at children with bubblegum flavor, grape flavor, chocolate flavor, I mean, they sound like the candy, But Madam Chair, that tobacco product can kill. And I watch people who had illnesses related to cancer, related to smoking, as their illnesses progress, and it's not pretty. It's not something you want to see your family members go through. It's not something you want to see your children go through. And when you listen to the statistics that half the high school students who smoke use flavored tobacco, that should be alarming to all of us in here. You know, if we can keep that out of their hands. But when Big Tobacco use this stuff as part of their marketing ploy, they have deep pockets, Madam Chair. And they can put it out there in a number of different ways. And they can put it out there so that, again, children who don't know any better or who are young enough think it's cool. You know, watermelon flavored cigarillos. Cigarettes that look like candy. And Madam Chair, in one of the articles I had here earlier, there was a picture on the article and it had a candy dish filled with tobacco products. And the caption on the article, and I'll table the article, Madam Chair, later, it said that tobacco should not come in candy flavors, implying that the candy dish is for candy for children, that tobacco is not the spot for it to be. So if we're putting flavors into that, that's trying to entice the kids into smoking. And again, I've heard in the 1990s, flavored technology resulted in the appearance of candy and fruit-flavored, alcohol-flavored cigarettes. And traditional cigarette brands that created flavored version boosted sales by almost 10%. So the marketing of that, Madam Chair, is what they're aimed at. They're aimed at getting first-time people into smoking, young children into smoking. You know, when you read stats that in Canada, 52% of the students in grade 9 to 12 who reported any tobacco use in the last 30 days had used flavored tobacco, that should be alarming. But based on that, Madam Chair, 169,000 grades 9 to 11 students in Canada are using that flavored product. 169,000. Madam Chair, that could be your kids, could be my kids, could be my grandkids. Now, the other thing, the prevalence of flavored tobacco as a proportion of all tobacco use was slightly lower for students in grades 6 to 8 at 35 to 42%. Grade 6 children, 12 years old, which is another 18,000 children in our society. And another statistic that was there was some provinces with high overall flavored tobacco use actually had low menthol cigarette use. Quebec ranked highest for overall flavored tobacco product use and lowest in menthol cigarette use, while the Atlantic provinces in Manitoba ranked second lowest on the overall flavored tobacco use, but highest on menthol use. So if we're keeping both menthol and flavored tobacco in this bill, it's going to affect our children. And Madam Chair, we make bills, or we pass bills in this legislature to protect all citizens of our society, but especially our children. We've had other laws that come in that we put bicycle helmets on them to protect our children. We take out flavored tobacco, it protects our children. You know, the Minister of Health admitted that the bill was flawed. You know what, Madam Chair? Maybe it is, but it's a good place to start. And we got to remember that a lot of this is about protecting our children. As an adult, if you want to pick up a cigarette and have a smoke, that's your choice. You know what's right and wrong. But children who see this, they want to try it. You know, when you're young and I know my dad was a heavy equipment operator, and he would go on Saturday morning when I was a kid, and he would go out to the pit and load trucks with gravel, and he'd let me drive the tractor. Well, I thought that was great, but what did he do when the truck was waiting? He'd have a cigarette, so I thought that was normal. We don't want to have that in society where our children can see that and someone else's children can see that and think it's right. You know, we think the right thing to do right now is take the bill, do the consultation they're talking about, and bring it back that it's as strong as we say it's going to be. But a bill that'll have no flaws in it, that nobody will be able to get around. A bill that will protect our young children. But, Madam Chair, as we can see, as we've heard and we're looking at, it doesn't appear that that's going to happen. It doesn't appear that they're going to do that in this session, that they're going to pass this flawed bill. So we're asking the government, please, put a stop to it now, ban the flavored tobacco, change the bill, strengthen it, and bring it back later. You know, if we can do that now and look at protecting our children, but if the bill is passed, I've heard numbers like 3,600 more children are going to start smoking or try flavored tobacco this year. It's the gateway to smoking that we want to stop, we want to close. You know, we put a fence around our yard to keep our dogs in so they don't get hit with cars. We try and protect our children in every other way. We teach them right from wrong. You don't do this, you wear your helmet. But then we keep this flavored tobacco in a bill that can get in the hands of children because it's still in the stores. So, Madam Chair, I urge the government to salvage what's left of this bill, this flawed bill. You know, if we can ban flavored tobacco, do the right thing right now. Ban the flavored tobacco, bring the bill forward, ban the flavored tobacco, strengthen it as we can strengthen it. You know, I look around here and I see a lot of young members, Madam Chair, that have young children. I'm sure that not one of those members want their children to take up cigarette smoking. And it might not seem like much right now, the people who have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old children, or even younger than that. But if we make this normal in society, and we keep this in the reach of our children, I think we're failing them. And you know, the last thing I want to do is fail our children. Our children are going to be our future. They're the people that are going to be here in 25, 30, 40 years doing what we're doing now. And I'd hate to look back to see that we didn't do our very best to try and protect them. Because you know, Madam Chair, we're all in this building, in this legislature. I'm one of 51. I think it's a real honor for me to be here. I think it's an honor that we can represent our constituents. And when I was home on the weekend, that was one of the biggest things I heard was that the flavored tobacco, the flavored tobacco, the flavored tobacco. What about our children? What about my grandchildren? You know, if we put our children first, if we look at the consequences of this, we look at the cost of this to society, we look at the medical costs, the health care costs, the costs on our children, we will do the right thing, we will step back, we will strengthen this bill, we will ban flavored tobacco, and we will keep it out of the hands of our children, and we will make this province and the people in our province proud that we're protecting the children and the people of this province. And with those few words, Madam Speaker, I will take my seat.
The honourable member for Truro Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to rise to my feet to talk about Bill 60. However, I feel, as many of my colleagues have already said, that it's a shame, in a sense, that we have to get up to our feet to talk about this particular issue. We would have thought that tobacco products and the issue about smoking, like the issue of alcohol, would really have been dealt with long before now. And as our acting leader said earlier tonight, thank you, as our acting leader said earlier tonight, She's already talked about this bill many years ago and many times over the years, even tabling a book called Smoke and Mirrors, which is about the tobacco industry and how they have a hold on our society and how they affect the economy and really basically try to brainwash people into allowing them to make money in a very unhealthy way while it kills people. So, Madam Speaker, in our society today, I believe that we're faced with increasingly pervasive pressures, both overtly and covertly, from industries as they seek to mold our environments into ones that suit their corporate needs, rather than the health promotion and the protective needs of our populations. And as this occurs, our governments succumb to these pressures in order to basically make money and keep their economic relations healthy with these companies, thereby undermining the need for policies with a public health focus, including evidence-based alcohol and tobacco public health industries and policies. Madam Speaker, I think that we need to keep in mind that branded labeling is a form of marketing and functions as a way to target the products to specific demographics. So for this reason, when a child reaches a certain age, it seems like they're unable to escape the innumerable amounts of advertising and marketing with relationship to tobacco and alcohol. So, for instance, Madam Speaker, when I was a child growing up in Australia, I remember these little cigarettes, Popeye cigarettes, that were candy cigarettes that you could buy, and you used to pretend with your friends that you were really cool and that you were smoking. And you would keep them in your mouth and you'd suck on them and you'd act like a grown-up, because that's what you'd seen grown-ups doing in the movies and in life. And eventually you would eat them. But I have since read, since then, Madam Speaker, that it was actually an advertising gimmick and that they were in cahoots with the tobacco industry of the time, because they wanted to get kids used to the idea of having something in their mouth that's like a cigarette and getting used to the idea of that it was cool. So, for instance, Madam Speaker, fast forward, and now today we have these products that are these fancy, pretty, shiny products, silver, pink, purple, whatever, that will attract young girls and young men to try them and act like they're cool. I was actually very concerned, Madam Speaker, that some of these gadgets and the wares that they come in, these boxes that they come in, look to me almost like needles, like they are drug paraphernalia, that you can open up this box and see all these shiny things, and you can put one thing into another, and you can smoke that, or then you can change it into something else. And I'm telling you, Madam Speaker, it reminded me of a movie from, The Marathon Man or something, where you've got the crazed dentist who's torturing Dustin Hoffman with these different devices. And I swear, Madam Speaker, that they do seem to be related to the drug trade as well. And this is very concerning. So, Madam Speaker, I don't have children, but I do have 2 nephews and a little niece. And I am very concerned about their future, and their future in a society that is constantly and increasingly being run by corporations that are really attacking and targeting youth to try and brainwash them into living a certain way and using certain products. So, for instance, Madam Speaker, as I mentioned in a speech earlier today, fast food outlets
Order,
like...
please. There are entirely too many conversations in this room, so I would ask all members to please keep the tone down to a respectful level. The Honourable Member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
I truly thank you for that, Madam Speaker. Thank you for noticing the chatter, and it is very hard to concentrate when there are lots of conversations going on, but thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I know that these kinds of issues are very close to your heart as well, Madam Speaker, because when I talk about addictive substances, I don't necessarily just talk about tobacco. I'm also talking about alcohol substances as well, and drugs. And I, for one, as you are also overly familiar with the problems associated with these things. And as I was about to say, I don't have children myself, but I do have two nephews and a niece. And being an alcoholic myself, I know that addictions run in families and that alcoholism runs in families. Sometimes it skips generations, so that you may not have a child that's an alcoholic, but you may have the child of a child who's an alcoholic. And so, Madam Speaker, what I learned in my days of learning how to live a sober life, I discovered that, in fact, they say quitting smoking is harder than quitting drinking. That's what they say. That's what alcoholics say. That's what people who have smoked say. That quitting smoking is harder than quitting drinking. It is that much more even addictive. And of course, being an alcoholic, I know how addictive alcohol is. I've never smoked before in my life, cigarettes and tobacco products, but I do know what I've seen from my friends, and I have had many friends who have died from smoking. And we have a dear colleague right now who is very sick and fighting the battle of his life because of his smoking. And our dear colleague from Sydney, Whitney Pier, cannot be with us tonight, but if he's watching, I want him to know that our love and our thoughts go out to him, because he smoked all his life, Madam Speaker, and he used to leave the chamber and go out and smoke outside, and we'd say, you know, you have to quit smoking, it's going to kill you. And he'd say, yeah, I know, one day I will. Well, one day, Madam Speaker, he went to his doctor and he had a sore throat, and he found out that he had a tumor on his tonsils, and he had to have his tonsils taken out, and then he became one of the people that then had to have part of his tongue taken out and part of his palate. And he is struggling, Madam Speaker, and he's come in here to the House, and we've seen him, how much weight he's lost. I think they said he was 199 pounds before he got sick, and now he's 150 pounds. And if anybody needs to look any farther than that to see what the damage of smoking will do to you, I don't know how far you have to look. And our dear colleague doesn't drink, hasn't had a drink in many, many years. And we have attended many parties and gatherings where we were the only two who didn't drink. And everybody else was drinking, but we stayed sober, and he would serve the liquor to other people. But unfortunately, Madam Speaker, he did continue to smoke, and it has affected his health. And so I don't like to think of our children being bamboozled into getting used to the idea of buying or getting in any way they can any kind of product that is going to make some company richer and kill them, and make us extremely sad that we're losing our children. And the statistics show that although tobacco and the problems with smoking are not being talked about as much anymore in the news as they used to be, because people thought that the problem was under control, it's coming back. And if you've got statistics showing that children, that a third of the high school grade 9 to 12 students have been trying tobacco products in the last 30 days, and that a third of them are menthol cigarettes, then I say ban them now. Why wait? How many more kids need to get hooked? How many more kids need to die, or even from the tobacco, the flavored tobacco that they chew? They see their sports heroes up there chewing tobacco. And we heard the nurses and the doctors come into law amendments, Madam Speaker, talking about the patches of white that stuff causes and how it's cancer. And they then have to gouge out those people's cheeks and tongues and gums because of they've thought it was cool, Madam Speaker, and that the flavors hide the damage that the tobacco is doing. And I think that that's really scary, and it's something that we as Nova Scotians should all be aware of, and we should all put down our foot and say enough is enough. Why let big companies rule the day? Madam Speaker, when I lived in the States, working there as an actor, I was living in New York for a number of years, and I have these friends who are filmmakers, and they were doing a film about mercury poisoning. And these particular friends were talking about mercury poisoning in your dental implants that were made out of mercury, and they were saying that really you should not have mercury in your mouth, you should have other types of plastics and the newer types of devices and stuff that you can get in your mouth now instead of mercury. And they wanted to meet another friend of a friend of mine who was an expert about mercury poisoning in rivers and in the environment. And I got to meet this gentleman because my friends wanted to meet him, and I set up a meeting for them to do an interview with him for their movie. And that gentleman was a champion lawyer, environmental lawyer, who fought the biggest companies in America and won many times about environmental poisoning, and also things like car companies that were producing cars with flaws in them. They knew that they were flawed, but they released them to the public anyway because it was cheaper to pay for a death lawsuit than it was to recall the car and fix it before they sent it out. Again, this is sad, Madam Speaker, but it's the truth. This gentleman's name happens to be Bobby Kennedy Jr., and what an amazing man. I got the chance, Madam Speaker, to ask Bobby Kennedy Jr. what he thought was the biggest threat to society today, to the world today. And I wasn't sure what he would say, but what he said is corporatization. Corporatization, in his view, was the biggest threat to our world today, because he said the corporations are taking over, they're becoming bigger and bigger, they are getting to privatize everything, including rainwater in Bolivia, where some of the biggest corporations tried to privatize rainwater for the peasants, if you can believe that. And something that the peasants needed desperately to live on, drinking water, rainwater that comes from the skies. But these companies thought, oh, this is another way we can make money. These people need it to drink, they need to wash their clothes and their pots and pans. Let's privatize it. Let's charge them for their natural water. And so they tried to do that, Madam Speaker, and you know what happened? They revolted. They had a revolution, and they took the rivers back, they took the waters back. And Madam Speaker, my point here is that if we allow the corporations to rule our world and our society, then we are going to lose control, and governments are not going to be able to catch up because the corporations are going to be in control. Some people would argue that they already are. But I would say, Madam Speaker, that we need to put our foot down now, and the people of Nova Scotia and our government needs to put our foot down now and say no. There are things that are more important. We have values that are more important than money. You making more money on the backs of our children is not right, and we need to say no, Madam Speaker. So, for instance, there's something else that I wanted to bring to your attention, too, that in this system of advertising and branding, it's all around us, Madam Speaker. And when you walk into a store right now, you cannot buy alcohol products, for instance, in that store at this point in time. But there are a few agency stores that are being set up. And we were told that originally Nova Scotia Liquor, the Liquor Corporation, was the only place that you could buy liquor. And there was a reason for that, Madam Speaker, because in order for those kinds of products that can addict people, like tobacco, alcohol, should only be sold in certain places where you have to actually go looking for it and find it. If it's easy to get and it's easy to see, then people are going to be more attracted to it. So, for instance, that's why laws have been passed where the children and people cannot see the tobacco products right there at the counter like they used to be. But Madam Speaker, one thing you can see are these flavored drinks, these energy drinks that kids are getting now, and these ones that they call owl pops that have, they're like fruity flavored drinks that have alcohol in them. And in some places, it's hard to tell which ones have alcohol and which ones don't. And the bright, shiny, again, the pictures on them are branded towards these kids, just like these tobacco products. And they're flavored like the tobacco products, the same thing, same flavors. And so, Madam Speaker, my point again is that all of these things are basically brainwashing our children. And they're brainwashing us. They're brainwashing young women, too. Young women tend to smoke, when they smoke, menthol cigarettes. Why? Because they just think it's healthier. Or many women get hooked on smoking because they want to stay thin. And as we know as women, that's a huge problem in our society. One time I went to a museum in London, England, and it was showing a particular exhibit called The Bodies of London. And they had dug up all these bodies from around the years, from over the years, below the city of London. And you could see these skeletons, and you could look at them, and it would show you what kind of dresses they wore, what kind of clothes they wore, what kind of makeup they used, what their habits were. And Madam Speaker, I have to say it was very interesting seeing what killed these people, because usually it was something to do with beauty. For instance, at one period, they went through a period of time where they wore white makeup that killed them because it was full of mercury. The white makeup was used to get rid of the pox that these people had on their faces, and the beauty mark, actually, like the Marilyn Monroe beauty mark that they used to wear back in the 17th century, that came again from hiding the pox marks on their faces. So, Madam Speaker, what I learned from that exhibit is that throughout history, human beings have been attracted to different things, thinking that it's cool, thinking that it's the in thing to do, when in fact, if you really stand back and look at it, it is killing them, and they die young of early deaths. Another one that I noticed, Madam Speaker, was the corset. So here were all these women that were put into these corsets, and they used to faint all the time. I wonder why. Because every day they were put in these corsets, and they would keep turning them tighter and tighter. Some of them would go to these special places where their families would send them so that they'd be husband-worthy, because if they had a small waist, then they would therefore be attractive to their male counterparts. So they would turn these corsets every day until they had a 13-inch or 14-inch waist, Madam Speaker. But you know what else that did other than making them faint? It squeezed their organs in to the point that they were misshapen, and they would oftentimes die of blood poisoning from their organs being all squished. So, again, my point is, we cannot, I think, lose track of the sight of what is important to us as living, breathing human beings on this planet today. Health is our greatest wealth. Wealth, Madam Speaker, it's all relative. And as we know, many people in Nova Scotia only make about $27,000 a year, 90% of the population. And many poor people smoke. And even though it costs a lot of money to buy cigarettes these days, they still smoke. Some people feel it's their only luxury. Some people feel it calms their nerves. And that's the problem with addictions, Madam Speaker, is at the beginning when you start to be addicted to whatever it is you're addicted to, it makes you feel better. That's why you do it. In the beginning, you do it because it makes you feel good. But after a while, Madam Speaker, not too long even, you become addicted to it to the point where you cannot do without it. I reached a point, for instance, in my own alcoholism where I had to wake up, and in order to do anything, I needed to have a drink. And for me, sometimes it would reach the point of whether to vomit or drink or vomit, one or the other. It was one or the other, and then the other one would come after that. And that's pretty bad, Madam Speaker. That's really bad. I stopped eating. I lost lots of weight. Of course, some people thought that was good because I looked thin and I looked energetic. I still looked energetic, but Madam Speaker, I was sick and I was dying. and cigarettes do the same thing. And that's why I feel that in order for us to be a progressive society and a smart society and a caring and compassionate society, we really need to look at the big picture and look at the whole picture, not just what's right under our nose. And we have to not just cave in and give in to, the latest lobby group, whoever the latest lobby group is, whether it's a corporation or whether it's the corporation putting the squeeze on the little local corner store owners and saying, hey, we want to get our money. We need you to go and tell the government that you're going to go out of business if you're not allowed to keep selling these products. And this happens, Madam Speaker. We all know that. Being in government now, you get to see it firsthand. You see all the people that come and lobby you for their own various vested interests. And I hearken back to what Mr. Bobby Kennedy Jr. said, which is corporations are the biggest threat to our society today. And Madam Speaker, the other thing I think we need to keep in mind about this is that all of us here probably have our weak spots. We have an Achilles heel. We're all human and we're all vulnerable. But Madam Speaker, I think as legislators, it's our duty to try and legislate things that are going to make life better for the people of our province. And I think every single one of us here knows what we really need to do. And I would really highly recommend that the minister take another look at this, talk to his colleagues on the other side, take into consideration what we have been saying. I know it gets repetitious. I know it gets boring after you hear it over and over and over and over again. But Madam Speaker, that's why we're ringing the bells so many times. That's why we're holding up this legislation, because we do believe that we need to ban flavored tobacco products, and we need to do it now. Thank you.
The honourable member for Antigonish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the last number of days that we've been here in the House during the Committee of the Whole House discussing this bill, there have been a number of comments made about what the government's doing, how this piece of legislation is proceeding, Madam Chair. And a lot of numbers have been thrown about, a lot of data, a lot of talk about research and the impacts of smoking and various vices on society, and in particular our youth. I guess first and foremost, Madam Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge that I agree with members across of the importance of using evidence, making informed decisions. It's an important part of our role as legislators. It's an important part of what we do here in the House. But, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, there are a number of challenges with information being presented by the opposition parties, members from across the aisle. First and foremost, I guess some of the pieces of information to clarify, even just this evening, that were pointed out. Members across the floor have made reference to how the smoking rates of our youth is 30%. That's not accurate, Madam Speaker. The data and the reports that have been referenced and cited, they made reference to a report that was conducted out of University of Waterloo, Madam Chair. I believe that report that they are probably referring to, I'm assuming, is the report out of the Propel Centre for Population Health Impact, which is the youth smoking survey, which has been ongoing for a number of years, Madam Chair. And in that particular study, the actual data is that the smoking rate in the last 30 days was actually at about 8%. A far cry from the 30% being reported by some members opposite. So I guess it is important to use information and data when we debate bills and legislation. It's important, but what's even more important is that we actually use accurate information and are very clear. It's also very important, Madam Chair, that when we're debating bills that we not only use accurate information, but that we represent and use that information accurately in our interpretation. For that, Madam Speaker, many people, probably opposite here, almost every single one of them, particularly for the official opposition, got up and spoke about how the deferral of the flavoured tobacco ban would result in, I'm paraphrasing roughly here, 3,600 new Nova Scotian youth starting to smoke. No, the report in the data. The report in the data. You bet, it's the same report. The data does make reference to 3,600 youth having smoked in the last 30 days, Madam Chair. But you're extrapolating that you're going to have 3,600 new smokers based upon that data. These are not new smokers. These are the data based upon the last 30 days of the point in time when the data was
Order,
taken.
please. Order, please. Order, please. Order. The honourable member for Antigonish has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I was saying, the key here is that when you're presenting the information, you have to make sure you're presenting it accurately. So no one's disputing, nobody's disputing that the report in question clearly indicates that 3,600 youth, Nova Scotia youth, have been reported as having smoked within 30 days of the when the survey was taken, Madam Speaker. But to extrapolate a causality that means that there'll be 3,600 new smokers within the span of any given period of time is not accurate, because a large number of those people in 30 days from now will still be within the age category being reported. So that's very important, Madam Speaker, that when we're looking at the information, again, the official leader of the official opposition tabled a report from Propel.
Order. The honourable member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Actually, the report says that 34% of Nova Scotia youth smokers smoked menthol cigarettes in the previous 30 days.
That is not a point of order, just an agreement of fact. The honourable member for Antigonish.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate the member opposite for raising on a point of order to really present their position as a, how do you frame it, a disagreement of facts. Madam Speaker, I'm not disagreeing with that statement that 30% of those people who smoked within the last 30 days. What I'm saying, Madam Speaker, is when that member stood up just 20 minutes ago, what they actually stated, unfortunately it's not recorded and answered, what they actually stated was 30% of our youth smoke, Madam Speaker. So that's a very important distinction. So, Madam Speaker, as we go through working through this, I'd like to stress, as I was saying earlier, that with the information back on November 5th, the leader of the official opposition tabled a report, the youth smoking survey, actually, Madam Speaker. This is the youth smoking survey from 2010-2011. At the time of tabling this particular document, Madam Speaker, he proceeded in question period to make statements pertaining to the prevalence of youth smoking in Nova Scotia, presumably making those statements in his question preamble on the basis of the report that he tabled, Madam Speaker. However, I'll retable the report. You want the answer too? I'm not used to paper, Madam Chair. I do everything digitally, so this is something new for me to keep track of the actual paper I have here. But I will table the answer as well, Madam Chair. But in the report from 2010-2011, it actually doesn't break down the Nova Scotian data, Madam Chair. It only breaks down data to the Atlantic Canadian level. So it would be impossible to extrapolate any information pertaining to Nova Scotia context from the report that was tabled on November 5th by the Leader of the Official Opposition. So again, Madam Speaker, when you're presenting information here, it is very important that the information be presented fully. So when you're tabling a report like that, and the government is certainly listening and paying attention to the information being brought forward by the opposition members, Madam Chair, but again, when you're presenting information and asking questions where the data being tabled does not contain the information that the premise is being based upon, we have a hard time to proceed, Madam Chair. Further, Madam Chair, I guess what I really want to get into here when I'm talking to this particular piece of legislation is what is in the legislation. The opposition parties have stood, they've spoken for a period of time on what's not in the legislation. And they've done very little to talk about what is in the legislation. Well, what is in the legislation, Madam Chair, is that it is banning the use of e-cigarettes, or the use of e-cigarettes by youth. It is treating those e-cigarettes as a tobacco product, Madam Chair. So it is going to bring in the most progressive legislation in the country with respect to e-cigarettes. Madam Chair, members from the opposition party, the official opposition, have stood up and they've indicated that, you know, we're really not as concerned. We're really not as concerned about the e-cigarettes as we are about the flavored tobacco. But really, they're under acknowledging the concerns being raised by health professionals, including the World Health Organization, Madam Speaker. They're ignoring the data, the very concrete data surrounding e-cigarettes at this point in time. For example, in a recent report, as recently as August 25th, 2014, the Center for Disease Control in the United States, just a few short months ago, released a report that shows that the number of youth have increased threefold in participating in using e-cigarettes between 2011 and 2013. A threefold increase in our student-aged population making use of e-cigarettes. Now, that's not at all, that's not a good thing, Madam Chair. What I'm saying is that this bill, Madam Chair, is going to end that practice with e-cigarettes. It's moving forward. It's moving forward, Madam Chair, on something that has been growing in prevalence, that really only came into the marketplace in North America in the last few years, and we're moving forward to get this out of our marketplace, out of the hands of our youth, in short order, as part of this particular piece of legislation. Why is that so important, Madam Chair? The fact that the increase that as the member opposite had talked a bit about the prevalence of big business, corporations, and the effectiveness of marketing, nobody disputes that, Madam Chair. Clearly, this report from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention from the United States in August of this year clearly indicates the success that the e-cigarette manufacturers have been having. But what's so significant here is the fact that youth who had never, and this is a quote from the report, Madam Chair, that youth who had never smoked conventional cigarettes but who used cigarettes are almost twice as likely to have intentions to smoke conventional cigarettes as those who had never used an e-cigarette in the first place. Clearly showing how concerning it is that e-cigarettes being available and accessible to the youth of our province, Madam Chair, is a current and pressing issue and concern that we have. We are standing up for our youth, Madam Chair. We are standing up for our youth, moving this legislation forward to get these e-cigarettes out of the hands of our youth, to ensure that the intentions to smoke do not become stronger, Madam Speaker. There are a number of reasons that people have talked about how society exists, Madam Chair, that influence people's intentions and getting involved in. The member from, all right, this is a lengthy one, you're going to have to help me here, Truro, Bible Hill, Salmon River, Millbrook. Ooh, and we know who I'm talking about. I'm sorry. But as the member rose and spoke about, Madam Chair, about some of her personal struggles, and spoke and shared some personal stories, which in a public forum is, I can appreciate, never easy to do. Yet, as we have these discussions about addictions and the influences of be it alcohol or be it cigarettes, that we want to do what we can to limit the individuals from moving forward and taking that first puff on a conventional cigarette. And we do that in this legislation, Madam Speaker, by removing e-cigarettes, which are leading to increased intentions and intentions which often lead to the actual practice of participating in conventional smokes. Madam Chair, we know that in law amendments there were concerns brought forward about our move to move forward and restrict the sale of e-cigarettes. You know, when we consider that, because a lot of people spoke about how e-cigarettes help as a smoking cessation. It helps them to get off of traditional cigarettes. That's something that we've heard from people who are smokers, certainly hear it from people who sell e-cigarettes. But again, a report from the University of California in San Francisco was conducted recently, and this report was reported on in our local news here in Nova Scotia back in, I believe it was March of this past year. On March 24th, this was posted, and here's a quote from one of the co-authors of this study, Dr. Pamela Ling, and what she told CTV News is, this is the direct quote, "You'll hear lots of stories from people that say e-cigarettes help them quit, but what we found was when we actually studied that systematically, we didn't see a significant effect on cessation." The research, Madam Speaker, is that e-cigarettes that people are bringing forward, suggesting that they're not a bad substance, not something we should be concerned about, Madam Speaker, is false. In fact, from the research that I've looked at, Madam Chair, the research that I've looked at, it's the early days when people were looking at e-cigarettes. When you read through an actual assessment of the analysis on claims that e-cigarettes are contributing to smoking cessation, it does indicate a number of things. The most recent, well, actually, the most general conclusion is that we're still collecting research that most organizations there are still some organizations that are disputing. They're coming up with different test results, but what we do see is that the more recent data coming out is suggesting that the cessation programs or perceptions are often just that, perceptions. That many of the reports and actual studies on the topic, they've concluded, people critical of the studies, that a number of biases through the research process, such as self-selection bias of individuals who have an intention and wish to participate, thus they are more likely to quit. There's never been really substantive, that I've seen, studies to date that have really reflected the general population and to really get a grasp or a strong hold, Madam Chair, on whether or not or the validity of claims that e-cigarettes do contribute to smoking cessation. In fact, some of the statements that come forward indicate that they're really no more successful at smoking cessation than other passive programs such as nicotine patches and so on that can help people step down, because it's the nicotine often that's the addictive substance causing the problems. Now, the World Health Organization Center for Tobacco Control Research and Education through University of California, San Francisco, for the World Health Organization Tobacco Free Initiative in December of 2013 put out a background paper on e-cigarettes. So it's a paper fairly extensive that's less than a year old. A number of key points summarized in the document, particularly regarding youth. You know, youth who use e-cigarettes are heavier, not lighter smokers, Madam Chair. Youth who use e-cigarettes are much less likely to have stopped smoking in the periods of time, having studied, again supporting the position of this government of the importance of moving forward with this legislation to ban e-cigarettes from the hands and accessibility of our youth in the province of Nova Scotia. Again, to my comments earlier about the question of the validity of claims that e-cigarettes help individuals to quit smoking, Madam Chair, the World Health Organization has concluded that longitudinal population studies show that e-cigarettes use is associated with lower odds of quitting. That's lower odds of quitting, Madam Chair. That indicates that the longitudinal studies over time are indicating that they're not seeing the success that anecdotal claims being made with respect to e-cigarettes helping individuals quit smoking. You know, early on, and again, that people would think, and this would, again, Madam Chair, speak to the member opposite from the NDP who brought up the points with respect to big business. You know, Madam Speaker, when you go through the research and you look at what people are claiming about e-cigarettes as really having some positive health claims, and one of the things that they did in around 2010, 2011, you see reported, is that people claimed, look, e-cigarettes can't be that bad. Big tobacco's not part of e-cigarette marketplace. Well, that may have been true when these products first came to the market, Madam Chair, but that's certainly not the case today, and that's highlighted and stressed by the World Health Organization. Direct quote, they indicate that while the original e-cigarette companies were competing with conventional cigarette companies, all major cigarette companies are now in the e-cigarette business, Madam Speaker. So any claims by the opposition parties that this government is in bed with big tobacco, Madam Speaker, is absolutely unfounded. Because big tobacco, Madam Chair,
Order, please. The honourable member for Antigonish has the floor.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the support from the members opposite. As I indicated previously, in case it got missed in the should I say heartfelt encouragement to continue, Madam Chair, as it indicated, clearly allegations or suggestions that this government, somehow with this legislation, is in bed with big tobacco companies is far from accurate, Madam Speaker, because we know, and the World Health Organization is clearly indicating, that big tobacco companies are in fact getting into the e-cigarette business. Why, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair, are they getting into the e-cigarette marketplace? Because they see it as a means to get into the pockets and to get access to the youth, because these products are not regulated in many, or if not most, jurisdictions across the world in this country, and Nova Scotia is no exception, Madam Speaker. But we, Madam Chair, in Nova Scotia, this government is going to move forward and bring forward have the first piece.
Order, please. Order, please. I find it quite ironic that most of the evening we've been hearing all comments from one side of the room with relative little heckling. So I would remind all members of the House to please please respect the order, please. The honourable member for Antigonish has the floor.
So again, why, Madam Chair, is it relevant that the role that big tobacco companies play in the cigarette market? Well, it's very important, Madam Speaker. As it indicated earlier, research shows that the intention reported by people who have tried e-cigarettes, by non-smokers, by people who have never smoked a conventional cigarette, their intention to smoke a conventional cigarette is twice as high, almost twice as high, as people who have never smoked a conventional cigarette in the past. Therefore, e-cigarettes are actually being seen in the literature and the research as actually being more of a gateway into traditional tobacco products than being seen consistently as a means to get off of those traditional tobacco products. Clearly, Madam Speaker, it's in the best interest of big tobacco to see jurisdictions not regulate e-cigarettes. Madam Speaker, you have to wonder why it is that there are several news reports, including out of here in Nova Scotia in the last couple of years, pertaining to Health Canada's failure to regulate and take a leadership role on behalf of all Canadians in regulating e-cigarettes. The media reports make reference to Health Canada sending out threatening letters, Madam Speaker, that are ignored by e-cigarette companies that sell these e-cigarettes. Clearly, even the people in that area report and have no shame being interviewed, indicating that it's a joke, Madam Chair. The way that Health Canada claims that these products should be regulated, but yet they do not move forward to enact any form of enforcement on those regulations. So again, it's very important to be aware that over the course of time in research between 2008 and 2012, the World Health Organization indicates that e-cigarette awareness and trial, that is use of e-cigarettes among both adults and adolescents, has almost doubled. Sorry, I should say has at least doubled, is the report from the World Health Organization between 2008 and 2012 from those countries where data is available and has been assessed, Madam Speaker. Again, knowing that e-cigarettes are a gateway, an entry point to intentions and thus higher use of traditional cigarettes, it's very important, and this is a very important piece of legislation as it stands, Madam Chair, to prevent the growth of smoking. The other thing, back to youth and e-cigarettes, I've clearly indicated, and I don't think any members opposite disagree with the fact and the concerns for youth. In fact, they've spent most of their time speaking to this particular bill in this committee, Madam Chair, as to the effect of youth. So I don't think anybody in this House disputes their concern and legitimate concern of youth accessing tobacco products. But again, they are underrepresenting the importance, and they are underrepresenting the significance, Madam Chair, of this piece of legislation and what it's doing to help prevent our youth in the province of Nova Scotia from getting addicted to traditional tobacco products, Madam Speaker. Chair. Again, Madam Speaker, a very startling piece of information pertaining to our youth and e-cigarette use from the WHO report is that the rapid market penetration here of e-cigarettes in our youth, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, is almost double. That is, awareness and use by our youth in 2012 data is higher than adults. So based on a 2013 report, it indicates that high school students' use and awareness of e-cigarettes is at about 10% of the population versus only 6% rate for adults. Madam Speaker, clearly indicating that these e-cigarettes are being targeted and penetrating with our youth population far greater than our adults. And this is a concern for us, clearly indicating and demonstrating this government's concern and commitment to the health of our youth by moving forward with this legislation as a ban on e-cigarettes, treating them as tobacco products, getting them out of the hands of our youth. The other piece of data that's very important or interesting in this particular report is that, again, indicating that over a longitudinal period of time—
Order, please. The House. Order, please. The honourable member from Antigonish has the floor, and I would like to ask the honourable member, please, to, if you could table your material that you took your information from. Thank you.
No. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, the WHO report clearly indicates that in some of the studies that they've looked at, that in fact, on a one-year study, so an initial baseline assessment in the report and then a one-year follow-up indicated that of the people participating, again, smokeless tobacco users were over 2 times more likely to have started smoking by the end of that year, again supporting the point that e-cigarettes are an entry point to traditional tobacco use, Madam Chair, again strengthening the position and the importance of this piece of legislation as it stands as a ban. Again, something that's been clearly understated, underrepresented, underacknowledged, Madam Chair, by the opposition parties as they've discussed this particular piece of legislation. You know, it's amazing for all of the time that some of the members opposite have been up speaking, that they've just focused on aspects that aren't in the legislation. What they've spoken about is what they haven't, what's not in the legislation, Madam Speaker. Yet, as we look at this, one of the members opposite earlier tonight made reference to flavor. Well, many of them made reference to flavored tobacco, and we'll leave. So, in this particular comment, if I recall correctly, and I don't remember which of the members this evening made it, but they made reference to, if I recall correctly, a 2011 time period. Sorry, late 1990s, I believe, when they indicated flavored tobacco seemed to come into the marketplace. Do we have agreement on that point? I believe that was something that one of the members brought up earlier. I don't have data to that effect. But that timing is quite interesting, Madam Chair. When you think that the last Liberal government in the province of Nova Scotia actually exited their position at about that point in time, that in fact, since that point in time, the only governments we've had were Conservative and NDP governments. And Madam Chair, I have to wonder, well, since the flavored tobacco were in the marketplace since that point in time, under both of these parties' leadership, Madam Speaker, what leadership did they take in that period of time? Neither of these parties. And although, Madam Chair, Madam Chair, although I'm just getting warmed up, I'm happy to come back again for an encore performance. But in light of the hour, I move that we adjourn debate on Bill number 60, Madam Chair.
The motion is carried. The committee will now rise and report its business to the House. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports.
That the committee has met, has made some progress, and begs leave to sit again.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That concludes the government's business for today. The House will meet again tomorrow, at which time we will continue with following daily routine. Committee of the Whole House on Bill number 60, third reading on Bill number 6, number 51, number 64. Madam Speaker, the House will meet tomorrow from the hours of 10 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. With that, Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now rise.
The motion is that the House rise. There has been a call for a recorded vote. For how long? I'm sorry? The motion first, okay. The motion is that the House rise to meet again tomorrow between the hours of 10 a.m. and 11:59 p.m. There has been a request for a recorded vote. We will adjourn for 1 hour. 1 hour. Adjourn until 12:58.